So if I were Anna, like if as much as I could put myself in her shoes, I would feel the exact same way, probably. Like if a family member of mine were killed by an invading army, I would want every fucking person in that army dead. And I would fight
I don't want
until
that.
I was dead, right? I can empathize with that position. I don't think that that's a reasonable strategy. I don't think fighting to the last Ukrainian, meaning could possibly mean millions of fucking people dying, is a good idea. And I don't think doing that for the collective West, having some sort of buffer state between them and Russia, is a good enough reason to potentially send millions of people into a fucking giant meat grinder. I just don't think that that's for that. But I happen to think that U.S. military support is the only thing propping up the Ukrainian military, and that the second that we pull that support, which at some point will happen, it just will, right? This won't go on forever. And when it does happen, that's when Ukraine will be forced to find a diplomatic resolution with Russia, and whatever comes of that will come of that. I happen to think that, the two outcomes will either be Ukraine joining NATO and ceding the territory that's been taken. I happen to think that's one possible outcome to this. Or I think Ukraine may get territory back and sign agreements that they won't join NATO, something like that. I don't think either of those solutions are, perfect or anything like that. Leaves everybody happy. Obviously, a bunch of people are dead now, so it's irrelevant almost in some cases. But at the end of the day, I just don't see this as like a scenario where the Ukrainian military, as bravely as they've fought, right, to give them credit where it's due, because Anna is right, this has carried on much longer than anybody has thought it would, even though there was almost a diplomatic resolution of this last April before Boris Johnson called the whole fucking thing off. But nevertheless,
Boris
the
Johnson,
Ukrainians have fought
yay!
bravely, et cetera, et cetera. I don't see them with billions more in weapons, regardless of billions more in weapons out being sent to Ukraine. I don't see the Ukrainians entirely pushing the Russians out and just pushing them out of Crimea and completely restoring all their territory. I don't think it's realistic.
Just to answer that, if you will, if he addressed
briefly,
me the
but
short
then we do
way.
have to go to
Yeah,
Wu to
briefly. Yeah,
interrupt.
very briefly. I mean, so first and foremost, I would say that our goal, obviously, is liberation of entirety of Ukraine. There is a possibility, of course, that we would have to, maybe cede some land. That is possible, although not desirable for obvious reasons. But this, you are correct, by the way, it does depend on the support from the West. But it is kind of funny that you think it's moral to blackmail people like that. Literally, is what you're doing is blackmailing us. You're saying that, yeah, don't get angry. Yeah, basically what you do, it is what you're doing. I mean, accept it. You're saying that we will, force you into negotiations, into ceding land, giving them the opportunity to attack us again.
You gotta
in the
let me
future.
respond.
Well, it's our money,
It's
isn't
not,
it?
it's not blackmail if someone says that I'm going to stop
for you.
engaging you in emotional exploitation.
Okay, hello. Welcome to yet another episode of Wick TV. I apologize for the late start. We've just had some technical issues. Anna is trying to get in here. We are going to get her in here. But I wanted to start the show and get this going. We're going to be talking about Ukraine today. The state of the war, whether or not NATO and the US should continue to fund Ukraine, who's winning, and what that means for the region. It's a pretty broad topic, but I have no doubt we're going to get into the weeds as we go. I want to thank everyone for being here. Everyone on my guests on YouTube, if you're watching there, hit that like and subscribe. If you're on Twitch, follow me if you haven't already. But we are going to start today with the one, the only, Brianna Wu. Give us your thoughts while I try to work out this issue. Okay?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, Wick. And this is such an important topic. When historians write the story of the Biden presidency, we're not going to be talking about trans athletes or masks or anything like that. The main thing we're going to be talking about is Ukraine. That is going to be the most significant event of the Biden administration. I can genuinely be a compromise kind of gal. I can try to work with people on a lot of different issues. I really fundamentally have to question your intelligence if you are not strongly for supporting Ukraine. I'm not going to ask you to go really far back in history, but I am going to ask you to think about World War II, where you had a madman that was going across Europe trying to expand his power. We tried to appease him. It did not work, and we ended up going into a war that cost a phenomenal amount of lives. There's very much the same situation here. Putin is a truly horrible dictator
and we
that
immediately got to
genuinely
Hitler and
threatens
Nazis.
worldwide geostability.
That's all right. I have a Nazi quip
The
in my
stakes here
opening too.
are literally democracy versus fascism. There is no argument I've ever seen that makes any sense for not supporting Ukraine. Even a fiscal argument is so much cheaper for us to support them. It is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what we spent on the Iraq war. It is the right mission, and it is international security interests. So I look forward to hearing what people's arguments are against this today, but candidly, it's hard to imagine what a credible argument could even be.
Okay, thank you for being here, and I guess we'll see as we go. Speaking of credible arguments, non-smoker, please.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Twitch.tv/nonsmoker. Yeah, I mean, I think I've had a pretty consistent view on this entire topic from the get-go. And my view has always been that supporting this war is doing little more than proliferating the conflict, which is resulting in more people dying. I happen to think that had the U.S. not contributed what is now amounted to over $40 billion in military aid to Ukraine, that the war would have ended much, much, much sooner. I've never bought into the appeasement narrative or this reductionist view that everything is World War II and everything is Hitler and everything is Nazi Germany as a rationale for why we have to pour billions of dollars into military aid to a highly unstable country fighting a global superpower. That I've also found a lot of the narratives are very dishonest about why we're over there defending democracy and so forth, when it's clear to me that this is just the extension of American hegemony. You could make a really strong argument that a big part of the reason the war began is because of the encroachments of NATO and, broadly speaking, the West into Ukraine as a political influence, and something that, created a lot of tension with Russia that didn't fully exist to the extent that it exists now. So, I happen to think a lot of the narratives are really dishonest, and, maybe the strongest argument I can make of all is that it seems very totalitarian that if you have any dissenting view on this, I think Brianna just made it clear with her opener, if you have any dissenting view on this whatsoever, you're just irrational and a total Vatnik and a total, Putin dick sucker. And I've never appreciated that kind of like single-minded thinking on any issue. So,
to be clear, that is what I think based on your statement, but we can go on.
Yeah, no, of course it is.
We'll get into it. Well, thank you for being here. Again, I'm sorry, a little distracted. We're working in real-time tech support with Anna here to get her in on this call, but we'll get it done. Dylan, please, go ahead.
Could you? Sorry, I kind of lost base. What were the questions again? There were like 3 or 4 questions.
Sure. Who is winning the war? Should we continue to support the war? What are the results or for the region? What are the possible effects in the region for Russian victory or for Ukrainian victory? What does that even look like? Just a general thing, broad strokes, if you will. There you go.
Okay, so I'll start off with the area that I think I'm going to be the most reconciliatory. Sorry, I'm very bad with the English language. Reconciliatory. Anyway. When it comes to who's winning, I never like that question. And the reason I don't like that question is it completely depends upon how you define victory and how victory during this war has changed. Originally, the Russian war goal seemed to quite simply be walking on every major city, capturing it, maybe overthrowing the Zelensky regime, installing something different. If that is the basis of Russian victory, obviously they haven't achieved it, and the Ukrainians have succeeded in stopping that. if the basis of Russian victory is taking the territory that they've declared that is theirs and that they've annexed, Zaporozhye, Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk, they have been unable to take the entirety of any of these oblasts, and in fact have lost over 50% of the territory that they've taken since day one. Now, if you look at Ukrainian victory, the Ukrainians have been successful in stopping the Russians from achieving their goals, but they have also been unable to, up till this point, to achieve their goal in liberating all of their territory, Crimea, the rest of Kherson, but they have cleared over 50% of the territory that has been captured since the February 22nd invasion. So to say who's winning depends whose metrics you're using, like how those metrics have changed as the war has gone on for the Russians. And so I don't like that question. I will say that right now, it feels like the Ukrainians have the momentum. Everybody is extremely anxious right now as we're waiting for the counteroffensive to begun. They have liberated over 50% of the territory that has been captured by the Russians since February 22nd. And there seems to be shipments coming in for Ukraine well into next year, stuff that's already been promised. And so there's a certain amount of momentum that the Ukrainians have that the Russians have not been able to build up during their winter offensive. So rather than saying like, oh, this side's winning or this side's going to win, because victory is far from certain for either side. The Russians don't have any path towards their original victory, but maybe they can try to scrape away the territory that they have held on to so far. But for the Ukrainians, they still have to do a lot of work if they would achieve their larger goals of liberating territory like Crimea. So I would say, instead of saying this side's winning or that side's winning, I would say the Ukrainians have the momentum. That's the answer for the first question. I don't want to talk too much. I'll just be simple. I want the Ukrainians to win. I think if the Ukrainians win, then it's going to mean longer-term stability in Europe. I think if the Ukrainians win, it means it's going to be a higher standard of living for Ukrainians. It's going to mean them being able to choose their own future, them being able to have their own autonomy and how they choose what economic system, what geopolitical system, what alliance system they want to join. It's going to mean ending of a multi-generational struggle for Ukrainian independence that I believe they deserve, just like the Algerians deserved it, just like the Vietnamese deserved it, just like every anti-colonial struggle deserved their own nation state. I think it's good for the United States. I think the transatlantic alliance has been one of the most profitable endeavors for the United States. While it is a heavy investment, for example, to do the infrastructure investments into Germany and to other countries after World War II, in the long run, it more benefited the United States to have these long-term economic and geopolitical relationships. And I think it also benefited the countries in question. That's why many of these countries ran to NATO.
Yes.
I'm not gonna ramble any more than that. I don't want to take up too much time.
Well, thank you for being here, and I guess we'll get into it as we go. Fabian, Liberty Scott, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm Scott from
You're
Fabian
muted.
Liberty.
You are
sorry.
muted.
Give me a second. Give me a second to respond. All right, sorry about that. Yeah, so I'm Scott from Fabian Liberty. You can find me on Rumble, YouTube, Twitch, live streaming on Rumble right now. Yeah, so there wasn't really a proposition for this because it's a debate, but I'm not sure what we're debating because there isn't a proposition. So I kind of just went off of what I put in the Discord and wrote this statement. So moving forward, Ukraine is a nation abused for decades by corrupt leaders invaded by the evil, dying Russian Empire. Since the start of the war, U.S. intelligence reports that there have been roughly 350,000 casualties, tens of thousands of innocent Ukrainian soldiers, as well as Russian soldiers, many of whom are conscripted, also known as enslaved people, have been murdered. Instead of seeking peace and an end to the bloodshed, Western powers are following the same playbook that has helped cause this very conflict. They're beating the war drums for the financial interests of the hegemonic power of corporations and allied nations. The few voices calling for peace are silenced and dismissed by neocons masquerading as liberals, like the war propagandists opposing me tonight. This propaganda is so pervasive that gone are the days of, quote, strategic empathy that helped the West battle the old Soviet Union. We cannot discuss the facts of Western encroachment and lies of NATO expansion, of human rights violations and coups in Ukraine against their own people, or anything that might threaten the bullshit narrative that the West is, quote, fighting for democracy, without being labeled Russian apologists or fascists as if we're the ones supporting Nazis. No, the West is not training F-16 pilots or supplying shadow missiles for fucking peace. Just like we don't arm moderate rebel groups for democracy while ignoring genocides that do not benefit the banks. Those who support continued funding and involvement, hoping for a Ukrainian counteroffensive to succeed, should be made to answer how many fentanyl overdoses, how many starving third world children, how much inflation, and how many dead Ukrainians are they willing to sacrifice for an imaginary better future outcome? Whose throat will you slit in your family to fight for democracy?
Well, I'm sure we will get into it, right? As we go. Anna, hi.
Hey, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, let me turn you up just a smidge.
Oh, can you do it? Yeah, I'm so sorry, Wick. I wasted your time to get
No,
in here.
not a waste, not
I
a waste. I
apologize.
understand.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Um.
So yeah, we're just doing a brief, concise introductions and opening thoughts. Do you have any for us?
Yeah, I do. My name is Anastasia. I'm from Kharkiv, Ukraine, and I'm a volunteer. I help my people defend themselves by, going to the front lines and delivering aid to them, and also sort of advocating for Ukraine at this point, as a spokesperson, I guess you could say. I don't have any like YouTube, Twitch thingies. I only have like Twitter, and it is Ukrainian Anna. So yeah, you can find me there and support my efforts to help my people and defend myself and others and my family and my country. If you can, I would appreciate it. And let's go on. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Oh,
gang,
I also am. Sorry, I forgot. I am that elusive Russian-speaking Ukrainian, by the way, from the east. That people use to justify and do apology for Russia. So yeah, it might be fun to talk with someone who's actually from here and who's fighting the fight. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
That's
thank you
it.
for being here. I really appreciate you
Thank
coming
you.
today. and we'll
Yay!
see-
Thank you for helping me.
No
I was
problem.
dumb.
Gang, if my mods in chat can put a link to her Twitter, and I'm sure it has all the socials and places you need to go. If you could put that in the YouTube and the Twitch chat for me, that'd be great. And last but certainly not least, OmniSlap.
All right. So yeah, I'm Omni_slap1 on Twitch, and that's my handle on Twitter. So you can follow me there if you want. So yeah, I'll try to keep it kind of brief though. So who's winning? Honestly, that's the part of this debate that I kind of studied the least. So I'm probably gonna speak the least on that one. But to my knowledge, it kind of just seems like a stalemate. Like particularly in the eastern half of Ukraine. But honestly, I don't really care too much about this question in the first place because I don't really care to like follow wars like they're a fucking horse race or some shit. I think it's kind of cringe, honestly. Just like I gotta follow every development going on in the war or some shit. Like it's just kind of cringe to me. I don't really care about like the day-to-day shit that's going on too much. I care more so about like the overall like the
Okay,
overall causes and
The
wait,
part
what? Huh?
you care about, let's do that. How's that?
Okay, all right. I mean, well, I was basically done with that. Yeah, I don't care. But it seems like where was I? Yeah. So what does it mean for the region? Unfortunately, I think it basically just means that Ukraine, specifically the eastern portion of Ukraine, will just kind of be like a contested battleground for a long time. I mean, if the stalemate keeps up, at least. It's just kind of a proxy war between the western side funding them and the eastern side, which is Russia, attacking them. And it's probably just going to go on like that for a really long time until some kind of peace is hammered out. I think that's just where we're headed, kind of. Should U.S. and NATO continue to fund Ukraine? Honestly, no, I don't think we should. I don't think we should have funded them in the first place, to be honest with you. But I mean, now it's a little more complicated because the war is already on, and we did like make assurances to protect them and all that. So I don't know. I guess my solution would be, I guess, to like kind of say, okay, Russia, like try to make some kind of peace with Russia. Be like, okay, we'll stop giving weapons and money to Ukraine and funding the war if you agree to maybe sit at a table and hammer out some kind of a peace or something. We could discuss that, and maybe we'll stop giving all this money to Ukraine that you're so worried about, and we could work something out. Okay, now the U.S. government is not going to fucking do that. All right, let's face it, they're not going to do that in a million fucking years because the U.S. government is all about war. Okay, we love us a good fucking war. We're not going to fucking stop. So That's not going to happen, honestly. But I'm just saying, if I was in control, that's what I would probably do. But yeah, so that's all.
Well, with that, let's open it up to the.
All right,
discussion. There's been a
I
lot of-
want to leap on a very
Hold on,
salient
hold on.
point.
Wait, can I? Sorry, can I
Hold
just get a clarifying question? What is the first question? Is it just like a generally open panel, or is there
Yeah,
like
it's a
questions
generally
we're gonna?
open panel.
Okay,
It's a
gotcha.
generally open panel. Go with whatever your heart's desire, whatever made you the maddest about what the hell this other people have said,
maddest.
whatever the contention.
Gotcha. Well, first off, I just
Wait,
want to
hold
say,
on.
Scott,
Can I
Well,
say
I will
something first?
personally. Well, no, this is really important, Scott. First off, I will snort all of the fentanyl necessary for Ukraine to win. Okay, you can continue.
Excellent. I want to come back to a point
should do it.
that
Kill yourself.
I'm
Oh,
going to
oh,
finish talking.
ooh.
Can we start this today where I don't get interrupted 10 times? I would really appreciate that.
Wait,
I
hold
want to
on.
come back to a point that's not fucking funny.
Why not?
I want to come back to a point that you were making about like why people would consider people that are opposed to supporting Ukraine, why we would, I think in your very vivid analogy, think that you were Putin dick suckers were, I believe, the way you phrased that. I think the reason it comes off that way is so many of your arguments are completely ahistoric and really belie a fundamental understanding about the history of the region. I'll give you one really good example. Something
Just
we
real
keep
quick,
hearing over.
Do
no,
you have any examples
no.
of my
I'm
arguments
going
that
to
you're
finish
attacking?
talking. And
Okay,
you're gonna
okay,
not
okay,
interrupt me.
everyone. I guess I'm gonna have to put my moderator hat on tonight. We'll finish, then you can respond. I promise you.
You're-
We'll all get
Can I go
time.
after
I see
them?
you too, Omni. I see you too,
Yeah.
Omni. But we got to go in at least some semblance of order, so you're not all just screaming at each other.
Yes,
Ooh,
sorry. I
excellent.
just wanted her to back up the claim with my actual arguments
You
because she
can-
said
you
that
can-
our
Yeah, you
arguments were
can
bad.
when
let
she's
me
done.
finish
Woo,
talking
please.
like an adult.
She's yelling
Thank
at
you.
me anyway.
Me too.
Yeah, fair enough.
Go on. What's the deal? Go on.
I'm going to start out. So, one of the reasons I think that y'all come off as, frankly, dick suckers for Putin is you don't seem to have a lot of historical knowledge about the region and the way that Putin operates. Something that I hear over and over and over and over again is you guys blaming Putin's foreign policy decisions on America. And I think this particularly really belies a fundamental misunderstanding of Putin and how he operates. With the American identity, we go on about our lives. We don't need Russia. We don't need to think about Russia for our daily lives. There's just something, they're out there. What I think you might not understand is America is very, very central for Russian lives and Putin's domestic agenda there. We are the enemy that he brings up over and over and over and over again. Every single America could go out tomorrow and put on I love Russia t-shirts, and Putin would still keep up this policy because he's so much weaker than I think people realize. And the way this comes across is he is putting these policies forward, blaming us for XYZ. We are a convenient scapegoat. Now, the reality of this situation is I don't like war. I was adamantly opposed to the Iraq War and Afghanistan. I was adamantly opposed to Obama expanding Afghanistan when he got in charge. This is a war that both the left and the right are looking at objectives. Serious foreign policy people are understanding this makes sense to support because the expansionism threat is real. NATO represents over 1 billion people on the planet, and Putin has pushed and pushed and pushed this situation. He invaded Ukraine thinking that would continue the Obama policies of us doing nothing in response. And I think that we can either show strength here or we can continue to show weakness here. And I think that it's been a real foreign policy disaster believing that we can appease Putin.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Okay, so your argument is the evidence that Russia is not making decisions based off of U.S. Foreign policy or U.S. decisions is that the United States doesn't need to worry when living within the hegemonic powerful structure that they are in the United States, but that Russians believe it's an existential threat. What evidence is that? That's the like. In fact, your evidence the only piece of evidence that you cite actually tends towards the claim that Russia is doing things because of U.S. foreign policy experience, and that Americans don't feel threatened by Russian power, and that we could all wear whatever fucking T-shirt we want tomorrow, and it wouldn't make a fucking difference because we might just see a 50-cent increase on cheeseburger prices.
That's
like,
not what
give
I
it, give an
argued
evidence
at all. If you have to mischaracterize my arguments because either you don't have one of your own or you don't understand it, so I will
I got
help
plenty
you
of
out.
my own.
I will repeat
What you said were all
for you.
bullshit without hearing.
I'm going to repeat what I said for you. If you want to discuss what I said, we can talk about that. My point here is that I think Americans don't realize that Putin uses the United States as basically a villain, the same way that Republicans are using trans people right now, for instance. It's a convenient enemy to point to and to blame for XYZ, so you're not thinking about all the domestic power issues. It's a vector to his personal power. So I do think that you're correct that there's a sentiment in Russia that this has been whipped up and made them very afraid of us. But I think that you cannot blame the expansion into Ukraine on the United States. Putin was going to do that because it solves his domestic problems.
You definitely can.
Go ahead.
Nobody's
Wait,
making
so,
the
okay, wait,
argument
can
that
I
it's
ask you a
purely
question?
the US's fault. Like, it's a univariate analysis, and you just restated your piss poor logic. Go ahead.
Did you?
Hey.
Yeah, Anna, I want to give you some space here. I know you're new to the panel scene, so I want to give you a little space here to
yeah.
have a say. Go ahead.
So you guys, I know Americans, right? All of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you talk about America all the time. Makes sense, you know? But the actual reason of that invasion and slaughter of Ukrainian people is imperialist expansion. It's pretty simple. You guys, I think you're leftists, right? So you supposedly should know about that thing. Maybe colonialism, maybe heard of it, maybe not. I'm not sure. But the thing is that Putin's dream, long life dream, is Soviet Union 2.0, or another version of Russian Empire, whatever it is called. Russian Empire, Soviet Union, modern day Russia, same shit. Nothing changed. So for him, of course, Ukraine was the easiest target. He thought so, at least. Next be Georgia and Moldova, which he already annexed and invaded previously, before 2014 Ukraine. And of course, people are worried about countries that are part of NATO as well, that were occupied by Soviets previously, such as Baltic countries, for Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, whatever the fuck, right? Poland, obviously, as well. But I personally, it's just my opinion, but I personally think that he would never, because NATO. But on the other hand, countries like Moldova and Georgia are not part of NATO and already have a precedent of being invaded and annexed and thousands of people being killed. Russian imperialism is just, as any other imperialism. Only difference is that they actually do, in fact, invade and annex territory. So, yeah, also genocide people, obviously, but that's another story. That's something that colonizers tend to do.
Yeah,
And,
so
yeah,
none of that is
that's
true.
it.
None of what you just said is true. It's
Okay,
complete
one at a
bullshit,
time.
by the
We'll
way.
go. We'll go
Oh, you
Omni,
see?
then we'll go Smoker, then we'll go. Fabian.
Never invaded Moldova, never invaded Georgia, never invaded
No,
Ukraine.
I'm not talking about that. All right, I'm talking about Ukraine specifically.
What is
okay?
bullshit then? Ukraine is bullshit.
So, to say that like this war is just because of like Russian expansionism, no, that's just fucking dumb. That's just bullshit. It's not. All right. And
There's several
like,
other reasons, obviously, but this is the main one.
Yeah, when talking about Western
yeah,
involvement,
what
that's
do you
talking
think
about.
those are? Could you tell me then? What are those
Well,
other reasons?
pretty simple, dude. Basically, this is something that Putin did for quite some time. For Russian fascism ideology, being at the top of Slavic food chain, so to speak, is one of the most important things for them. The so-called pan-Slavicism, they need to have Ukraine and Belarus for that, to pretty much maintain Slavic majority. And one of the things they want is to keep us in their sphere. And since pretty much 2014, it has not been working very well for them because of the Maidan revolution and a general idea of young Ukrainian people, and not young, many Ukrainian people, to go towards the, so to speak, European Union and Western sphere. which have been, as a result of that, we have been punished pretty much by, as they tend to do every time historically. Each time Ukraine tries to establish themselves as an independent, truly sovereign country, we get pretty much this type of treatment, whether it was communist occupation of Kiev after Russian Empire dissolvement, whether it was any other situation. But this particular one is just 21st century one, and yeah, they obviously don't want us to be anywhere near Western sphere. We did not intend to be part of NATO at the time, but just being European Union was quite enough for them, even despite the fact that we will not be taken there in
2008.
like 10 years or something like that.
Yeah,
So,
even
yeah,
though
just,
NATO literally
NATO
made
talks-
promises
NATO
to add
talks
Ukraine
in
eventually, but
08,
never mind that.
Like,
yeah, but didn't, and also majority of Ukraine at the time
not yet.
was not pro NATO. They are now. War happens.
I wanted to kind of pivot off to something earlier that Fabian talked about, but I just want to say that for me, while I do think that the existence of NATO did possibly contribute, I don't know how much, we weren't in the room, to the invasion of Ukraine, because it was a competing power structure in Ukraine, and Russia doesn't want any other competing power structure in Ukraine because it wants to dominate Ukraine. And if Ukraine's in NATO, then it cannot be dominated, just like it couldn't with Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. But I wanted to talk to Fabian about something. Earlier, he was talking about the mythical victory, and how this horrible war and all the people who are dying to attain this mythical victory, and all the blood in your hands and the fentanyl and all this stuff. For me, right, if I was telling a population, like let's say I was in South Vietnam and I was telling the Vietnamese, go fight the Viet Cong, I'm ordering you to go do it for our interests, domino effect, etc. I can understand saying this person is obviously a ghoul who does not care about the interests of the locals, who does not care about the interests of the Vietnamese. They merely care about the United States interest, and they'll do anything necessary to benefit that. But whether or not America is, to some degree, or even in large part, self-interested in how it supports Ukraine, whether the Ukrainian people themselves want to continue that struggle is going to be the main indicator in whether or not I am going to listen to somebody saying, what about all the people dying, and say, oh, you're right. Because I'm not going to tell Ukrainians, you've suffered too much. I'm the one who can determine how much you've suffered and what's the appropriate amount you can suffer for your own liberation. The Algerians suffered tremendously for the liberation. The Vietnamese did. People all around the world did. So when we, throw the fentanyl and everything else at me, fentanyl is a different topic, obviously, but when we throw this number at me of all the dead Ukrainians, would we not say that then it would be, it would be a little dishonest putting that on me when it's the Ukrainians' decision to continue to fight?
Right. So I don't want to step into an internal critique, because my both of the other proponents in this discussion are not ANCAP libertarians, right? So dealing within a framework of consequences, right? Just in that, what you are saying is that there is this presumed victory, whatever it is that you don't want to define, as you said, right? Because like what it means.
I can define
right,
what Ukrainian victory means if you want.
Well, I mean, I know
Well,
what
why don't
Ukrainian
we ask
victory means
Anna?
to Zelensky. I mean, I know I know what
You could probably
Ukrainian
define it.
victory means to Zelensky. It means 150-kilometer demilitarized zone, and Russia must move out of fucking Crimea, and then peace talks can occur after tribunals occur. Like, it's fucking retarded, right? Like until as we keep giving them money and they see victory in sight, or at least in some other place they can imagine a path to victory, then the bloodshed will continue, because Zelensky is not serious about peace in any way. But the problem here, when I bring up this mythical victory, is that you're saying part of your argument hinges that once this area is stabilized, it will mean stabilization. You're attempting to tell the future about what Russia will look like, what relations with China and Russia will look like, what Eastern Europe will look like, how all of these different things will behave in the future. And you're justifying current movements towards increased death and suffering, and not just in Ukraine, but also throughout the entire world as resources. Like, it's an incredibly resource rich area, right? There's a large portion of food that is being stopped, right? And this is one of many factors that is going to lead towards food cost increasing. That's going to the aid towards this war is going to mean less children in third world countries are going to be able to get foreign aid. People are going to starve and die throughout the entire world, as well as the people that are being butchered in Ukraine for a supposed victory that will supposedly be more stable and will supposedly be better. And like, I don't like to gamble with people's lives like you do.
So first, when it comes to the peace deal, anytime you negotiate, you're going to put forward all of your interests on the table at the start of any negotiation process, right? I hear the same thing when I talk about the Russians and them saying that they need to have Donetsk, Zaporozhye, Kherson, and everything else. I hear the same thing in response. Well, obviously that's what they're saying now, but once you negotiate, then you're going to get to a more reasonable position. The Ukrainians are going to put forward the position that they think would be the most moral for them. I do think, considering how many times the Russians have invaded and conquered Ukraine, that a demilitarized zone isn't even that crazy of an idea when it comes to the morality of it. Whether it can be implemented, whether it's practical, is a different story. So I don't think that's ridiculous, and Zelensky's completely uninterested in peace when he was elected on a pro-peace platform originally.
That argument is
and he
not
engaged in
operating on the moral
negotiations.
framework. That argument is operating on whether or not the person is realistic about their demands. Zelensky is not realistic in any way, shape, or form about his demands, and because of this, peace talks cannot go forward. I mean,
Do you believe that
to
be clear,
just real quick before I let you respond, I will let you respond, Dylan. I want to make sure that we get some of the other people in here who've been wanting to talk. Non-smoker hasn't said a word yet, so Dylan, respond, and then we're gonna go to non-smoker.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, there was a second part. There was a second part to the first question. I got to remember it, but for me, when he puts forward this position, this is how all negotiations start. I don't see this as any different than what would happen when, for example, the Armenians and the Azerbaijanis or any two sides start a negotiation process before they get to the final deal. If they were to sit down tomorrow, if the Russians and Ukrainians were to sit down tomorrow, I don't think that this is completely out in the space. This is so different than any other negotiation process, so different than any other proposal. Can you tell me the second thing you said originally? I forget the second thing you said originally. You said you made the first point, your second point.
I don't know that I ordered them in a list, so I don't know exactly what you would say. But what I would say is just to respond and then let non-smoker.
I gotta remember what the second thing. Oh yeah, the death and destruction. We make these calculations all the time about predicting what will happen in the future in order to take actions now on the geopolitical stage. This is how nation states operate with trade. This is how nation states operate when it comes to defense. This is how nation states have always operated. This is how alliance structures operate. So yes, the Ukrainians and the Western alliance structures that are supporting and the Western alliance structures who are sending aid to Ukraine or sending aid upon the assumption that that aid could contribute towards Ukrainian victory, which would most likely lead to more long-term stability, better security for Ukraine to not be invaded. And you can say, well, you don't know that for sure. And you're right. The world could explode tomorrow. We don't know exactly what happens in the next day, but we do have a record of seeing every single NATO state that has become part of NATO has not been invaded by a foreign power. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, all nation states that the Russians very much have revanchist, kind of imperialist ambitions towards, are not able to be invaded because they're part of NATO.
We've been given billions of dollars to Ukraine for decades.
Enough. We have to there's more people that want in.
What are you talking about?
There's more people who want in, and I want to make sure other people get a voice. Non-smoker, then Anna. That's the order we're going in. Non-smoker, Anna, and then we'll get more.
Yeah, thanks. I never thought I'd be agreeing this much with Scott. So yeah, I mean, a couple things. First of all, the whole Soviet Union 2.0 thing is it's just baseless. There's no reason to jump to that conclusion, or there's no evidence, I should say. That's a better way of putting it. There's no evidence that Putin has this aspiration to build an entirely new Soviet Union, reintegrate all the old republics. Well, okay, so obviously there have been a number of wars, and if you take each one in isolation, okay, listen, and you take each one in isolation and string together this narrative that, wow, he must want to rebuild the entire Soviet Union, when you take all of those things out of context, I could see why you would reach that conclusion. But there's no the one consistent thing that's come out of Russia is the fact that they resent NATO expansionism. They've been consistent about that since Gorbachev. It's been a consistent line.
No, it's just
that's even something Western diplomats agree on, right? If you look at a guy like George Kennan, someone mentioned diplomats earlier. Oh, all diplomats agree on this in the West. George Kennan, who's probably one of the most famous American diplomats in history, he even called NATO expansionism something that's restoring the East-West order that existed in the Cold War, right? And this whole idea that
CIA.
Right. And look, hold on a second. I got a couple points here. I don't want to get too off on each one. But I would understand the idea of like Dylan was talking about, like what the Ukrainians want, all that stuff. Obviously, I don't speak for Ukrainians, right? If I was a Ukrainian citizen, my country was invaded, I would want total victory too. I understand that viewpoint. But when we say what the Ukrainians want, at least when I'm referring to it, I'm talking about the government of Ukraine. And the government of Ukraine is completely beholden to the West because they rely on the West to have any chance in this conflict, right? So they're going to keep fighting so long as the West allows them to. And that's just how it is to the last Ukrainian. And it's a tragedy.
what we
It's
want.
horrible, right?
That's what we want.
Wait, can I ask you a
Well-
question? Would you apply this standard consistently? For example, all the movements the Soviet Union supported in Africa against, for example, French colonialism, British colonialism, Portuguese colonialism, that was part of the foundation that led to colonial powers being pushed out of Africa. Would you have made the same argument of like, well, you know what? You're actually adding to the death. These are nuclear powers. These are strong powers, powerful forces. You can't really defeat them. You should negotiate. Maybe you get half your country. You should negotiate. Maybe you get a third. Like, would you apply the standard consistently?
Look, I generally think that for me to apply the standard consistently, every circumstance would have to be the same. So if it really was a circumstance where X country had just no chance of ever being liberated, and pouring more money, more military aid specifically into that country would prolong the conflict, and there was no evidence, at least immediate evidence, that
if
the
I may
entire
ask-
territory was going to be annexed, then I would probably apply that consistent standard, yeah.
I want Anna to go, but before I do, an on-smoker, one question: do you think that Ukraine has no chance of being liberated? Do you honestly believe that?
No.
Okay. Anna, go ahead.
Wait, no, as in no, I don't believe that, or no, as in no, I don't think they can.
I think it's an
Okay.
unwinnable war, and I've said that from the start.
Okay.
So the unwinnable war was supposed to end in 3 fucking days or 3 weeks tops. We liberated Kievska Oblast entirely in a month. Sumska Oblast is region. We liberated Chernihivska Oblast. We liberated almost entirely my Kharkivska Oblast. This is a size of couple countries, just so you know, in Europe. We liberated those in a matter of months. That's for once. Second of all, second counteroffensives are going to start soon, quite soon. And yeah, so you have zero grounds to think we will not be able to do it. The great example of that would be Finland, winter war with the Soviet Union.
They lost.
Yeah.
They didn't. They didn't
The
lose.
Finland didn't lose the winter war? That's news to me.
Wait, my dude.
Wait, I thought they won just because
Hey,
Soviets stopped caring.
let her
but,
finish,
okay.
and then you guys can
Thank you
all
very much.
respond. I
They
promise you.
killed 350 Soviets while lost 70,000 people. 1-5, which is exactly how it is, by the way, in Ukraine. 1-5. So yeah, I know. You guys
we
know
get that
better,
per
Syrian
capita?
there, whatever the fuck you
Can we
are.
get that
So
per capita?
yeah. Anyhow, point is they ceded
Yeah, you wouldn't wanna do that, would
9%
you?
of their territory.
Wait,
9%.
Fabian, wait. Sorry, Fabian. Per capita, 1 to 5. What would that ratio be? Wouldn't it still be Ukraine would be even just
Dude,
population?
By that logic, America won the Vietnam War because we killed more.
Well, no,
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
wait. No,
we
wait.
had a better
wait.
KD ratio, guys. we won.
Wait. I don't want. Fabian,
I just want
5 to
I'm just
1.
curious
Yeah.
what the
Do the
per
math.
capita-
Like,
Continue, please.
wait. Just interrupt because Ukraine's 44 million people times 5. I think that balances out.
Thank you, my
Okay,
guy.
so
continue.
right,
Hey,
but
look.
that
I
doesn't-
want
right, so
Anna
it's not a
to
giant
finish her
victory of, like,
point
1 to
and to
5.
not get
Yeah,
to
let Anna
over.
finish.
Let's
Yeah,
let
Anna,
Anna
Thank you very
finish
much.
your point, then people can respond. Yeah, I promise you.
Yeah, good manners are rare apparently. So what I'm saying is that Finns ceded 9% of their territory, unfortunately, and the sole reason for that was because they got exhausted and got no support from the West pretty much almost at all. Whereas we actually do have that support, and if it continues, then we will continue to liberate our territories. I don't know if you guys know, probably don't give a much of a fuck, but my father was killed in Kharkiv by Russian artillery, and if which I'm not blaming the West, I appreciate any help you guys can give us, but if it was given to us sooner, then counteroffensive might have started sooner, and he might not be a splash on the wall right now because after
When?
a very
When did he die?
effective
You want to
counteroffensive-
use
You
use
gotta
him?
let
When
her
did he die?
finish, dude. I will. Okay, you have to let her finish
June.
before I start muting.
in
people.
June, 11th of June. So yeah, September the counteroffensive started,
So
and we waited on those offensive weapons for quite some time. Unfortunately, it took
Hmm.
way longer than we wanted to. But you know, bureaucracy, war, things don't go as fast as you would want. So yeah, after those counteroffensives, my city, me in particular, is not getting bombed anymore. So I very much thank you, Western allies and not Western ones, for providing that help. Because
I-
instead of getting shelled 10 times per day, it's now like maybe 1 time per 2 week or per 3 week, which is by my standard is almost peaceful, you know. And all people
okay.
don't longer
Another
die
point.
10 20 people per day. So this is your direct consequences of the West and also Asia, by the way, giving us weapons and defensive air defense mechanisms such as Patriot systems that provided safety for Kiev quite a bit. Unfortunately, Kharkiv does not have it, but they are no longer attacking Kiev with Kinjal pretty much at all, which Patriot seems to be dealing with pretty well, which my guy Dylan, you know, hello, much more safer than before, which I appreciated. But overall, yeah, this is what we need. What we need is support. Not to cede that territory, 9% that Finland was forced to cede. But if you don't consider Finland being this size, fighting off the army of 1 million fucking people a victory, then I don't know what to tell you. That's victory in my book. Although I
know
would
what to tell
prefer
you.
not to cede anything.
It's
Yeah.
because they
I know what
stopped
to tell
caring
you
because
real
something
quick.
else more important was going on.
If
but-
Boris Johnson
Yeah,
and the
of course,
West
yeah.
hadn't tanked negotiations in May, maybe your fucking father would be alive.
Whoa, dude.
Oh, you think?
Dude, that
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
so.
Alright.
You're
Can
being
I-
a
Actually stop the
real
war.
It's
asshole.
fine.
You're being.
Silly
That
that, you know,
is
happens.
so fucking.
Can we not? Yeah, can we not make light of
No,
that?
no,
Yeah,
no.
I
If
don't
people
know.
are,
I don't
if people
know.
are gonna
That's
bring,
fine,
if
that's
people are gonna
fine.
bring their dead family members in, and then they give me a date after the West caused the war to continue and could
Dude,
have fucking
this
stopped
is
the war.
you
But
are
I was
being
like, yeah, I do
deranged.
care that
You
your
know,
fucking
This
dad
is
dead,
so
and the West
inappropriate.
fucking
Enough.
directly
This is
contributed to it.
deranged.
Okay.
Enough.
How is that
The-
deranged?
the
We have
prob-
to.
The
We
problem.
really
the
have
problem-
to.
God.
Fabian.
Oh, because I'm
okay,
not
so-
engaged in
Not-
an emotional argument that I'm not just like,
Alright.
oh fuck.
You're being
her
an
dad's dead, so
asshole,
like I
and
have
you
to
know
be.
you're being an
Enough.
asshole.
I do not condone.
Let's
No,
beat that.
the West that keeps
It's fine.
causing fucking death and
Can-
suffering
okay.
is being an asshole,
Wick,
and the
Wick,
Russians
you're
that
gonna
are
have to
fucking killing
moderate,
people are
man.
assholes.
Look.
No,
I'm-
no, no,
I'm-
my dude. It's okay.
we're
It's okay.
letting
Don't
it
worry.
go,
It's
right?
Russians who
I
killed my
muted
father.
him, right? I want to reset
you.
the
It's alright.
the board. I understand. Let me handle it, please. Right?
Sure.
Okay. I wanted to let Anna finish. If she has finished, I wanted to let non-smoker and Omni respond, and we'll
Just a
unmute
little
you in
bit,
a
okay?
moment. Fabian. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a bit. Pretty much that's all. So we need those weapons to liberate ourselves. Of course, it is very important for continuous support. But every soldier, every single one, and I talk with a lot because I'm a volunteer, I go talk with them, you know. Every single one of them says that even if the weapons and aid cuts off completely, entirely, they will continue the resistance and the liberation of Ukrainian people, because for us it's a war of survival. For us it's a war of liberating ourselves and preserving our identity, and also protecting other people such as Georgians and Moldovans, and the safety of the Eastern Europe overall. So we are pretty much the, you know, the bridge and that they should not cross. And to be quite honest with you, I would obviously be super terrified, and it is depressing and kind of terrifying to know that people can cut off aid to us at any given time.
Yeah.
But other than that, I just think that this will cause way more death of my people, but my people will continue to fight regardless. So, you know, it's up to you, I guess. You guys decide. You're Americans. You vote or whatever the hell you do, right? To decide what if your politicians will do us, you know, any good and commit to the, I guess you could say, treaties and agreements we made. But for Ukrainians overall, it's just the question of how hard it will be, you know, and how much time it will take, and how much blood it will take, and for how long our cities will be in villages will be occupied, which every pretty much village and city we liberated has seen mass graves, torture, prosecution, imprisonment, which I saw, unlike all of you, with my own eyes. So yeah, so every day that passes that we don't liberate our people is the day they suffer under occupation, and no Ukrainian in their sane mind will leave their people to suffer that fate that people suffered in Izum, in Bucha, in Hostomel, in Irpin. So yeah, for us it's just unnegotiable. We either fighting, like you said, to the last Ukrainian, or we winning, and we would appreciate some help in winning for sure. Yeah.
I wanna let Omni and Non-Smoker respond to that, and then I want to let Wu in, and I want to let Dylan in, and that's the order we're gonna go in.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I mean, like, here's the thing, all right? Like, if like everything that Anna is saying right now, yes, it is. It sounds, true and like correct, but that's all. But like, yeah, only if you are talking about after the war already started. Like, you're thanking the West for giving you all these weapons and support to like help win the war. But if you want to talk about how did the war begin, though, it was largely because of us for decades before this war even started, funneling money and weapons, and not only that, but we gave absolutely no assurances that Ukraine would not join NATO eventually, which was, I think, one of the biggest deals from Putin's mouth himself for him invading this war. So if you talk about like after the war started, or the West support, yeah, sure, it sounds good. Yeah, we're helping you guys win the war, but maybe the war didn't have to fucking start if we were not influencing this region with some billions and billions of dollars of money and billions of dollars of weapon and equipment and training and doing drills on the frickin' border of Ukraine and Russia. Yeah, I think that kind of helped start the war. So maybe the war didn't even have to happen in the first place if we didn't fuck around there. You know what I mean?
Just a quick little answer. You care about Putin's words when it comes to NATO, and you say that but you don't care about his words when he says, I want Soviet Union 2.0, Russian Empire, Ukraine is not a country, Ukraine is not
When
a
did he
nation.
say that, by the way?
Ukraine-
Did he actually
No,
say
no,
that?
no.
Can you link
Yes.
link where he
Yes.
said
He did.
Yes.
He said it.
When?
Guys,
Yes, he
several times.
said that his whole
Ukraine is
career.
not a nation. Ukrainian identity is a disease of
Even
the
though
mind.
he's
Ukrainian language
anti-communist, he
doesn't
said that.
exist. I can go on for hours, for fucking hours, because I speak Russian. I listen to the guy for 8 years now. So yeah, this is you don't hear that, but you hear, oh, NATO, that NATO. And yeah, that NATO, they didn't attack fucking anyone in quite a long time, in decades, to be quite honest. That was a defensive alliances for quite some time now, where Russia wasn't. Where Russia since its independence pretty much since 91st, when the Soviet Union collapsed and everyone become kind of their own separate kind of countries, kinda, because they were still under Russian thumb, obviously, but that's another story. Since then, they have been non-stop in fucking wars and invasions. Chechnya, Moldova, Georgia, Ukraine, whatever the fuck, right? And yeah, that's have been a pattern, whereas NATO have not been such a pattern. So I do agree that, of course, Putin uses that as an excuse, but it's just kind of funny that you listen to that, but you don't listen to the entire ideology of today's Russian state, which is what I just described. So yeah, I agree with you in some regard that to me it doesn't important, to be quite honest, why the fuck it started. But as you said, for me, well, now is important, right? I'm here, I'm in Ukraine. But on that you're correct. But you're wrong on the fact that for some reason you are very selective in what you're hearing from Putin's mouth. Yeah.
Wait,
that's
so
what I want to say
first,
about it.
are you aware that Putin was actually interested in joining NATO early on in his
Yeah, at
presidency?
some time. Yeah, at the beginning he was. Yeah, then he changed his mind. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, so
America
I mean-
changed it for him, kinda.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm aware. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, what you said.
I want to give non-smokers.
Well,
some
I'm
space,
glad
and then-
I'm actually glad I got that out of you, Anna. By the way, that you agree that we did help cause the war. Okay, that's good. All right, all right.
non-smoker.
Not
Wu,
disingenuous at
Dylan.
all.
That's the
Not
order we're going in.
But, you know.
Non-smoker. Wu, Dylan.
Good job.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, look, I just want to say first and foremost, like, so if I were Anna, like, if as much as I could put myself in her shoes, I would feel the exact same way, probably. Like, if a family member of mine were killed by an invading army, I would want every fucking person in that army dead, and I would fight
don't
until
want that.
I was dead. Right? I can empathize with that position. I don't think that that's a reasonable strategy. I don't think fighting to the last Ukrainian, meaning could possibly mean millions of fucking people dying, is a good idea. And I don't think doing that for the collective West, having some sort of buffer state between them and Russia, is a good enough reason to potentially send millions of people into a fucking giant meat grinder. I just don't think that that's for that. But I happen to think that U.S. military support is the only thing propping up the Ukrainian military, and that the second that we pull that support, which at some point will happen, it just will, right? This won't go on forever. And when it does happen, that's when Ukraine will be forced to find a diplomatic resolution with Russia, and whatever comes of that will come of that. I happen to think that, the two outcomes will either be Ukraine joining NATO and ceding the territory that's been taken. I happen to think that's one possible outcome to this. Or I think Ukraine may get territory back and sign agreements that they won't join NATO, something like that. I don't think either of those solutions are, perfect or anything like that. Leaves everybody happy. Obviously, a bunch of people are dead now, so it's irrelevant almost in some cases. But at the end of the day, I just don't see this as like a scenario where the Ukrainian military, as bravely as they've fought, right, to give them credit where it's due, because Anna is right, this is carried on much longer than anybody has thought it would, even though there was almost a diplomatic resolution of this last April before Boris Johnson called the whole fucking thing off. But nevertheless,
Boris
the Ukrainians
Johnson,
have
yay.
fought bravely, et cetera, et cetera. I don't see them with billions more in weapons, regardless of billions more in weapons out being sent to Ukraine. I don't see the Ukrainians entirely pushing the Russians out and just pushing them out of Crimea and completely restoring all their territory. I don't think it's realistic.
Just to answer that, if you will, if he addressed
briefly,
me the
but
short
then we
way.
do have to go to
Yeah,
Wu to
briefly.
then
Yeah,
go.
very briefly. I mean, so first and foremost, I would say that our goal, obviously, is the liberation of entirety of Ukraine. There is a possibility, of course, that we would have to, maybe cede some land. That is possible, although not desirable for obvious reasons. But this, you are correct, by the way, it does depend on the support from the West. But it is kind of funny that you think it's moral to blackmail people like that. Literally, is what you're doing is blackmailing us. You're saying that, yeah, don't get angry. Basically, what you do, it is what you're doing. I mean, accept it. You're saying that we will, force you into negotiations, into ceding land, giving them the opportunity to attack us again.
You gotta
in the
let me
future.
respond.
Well, it's our money,
It's not,
isn't
it's
it?
not blackmail if someone says that I'm going to
not
stop
for you.
engaging you in emotional exploitation.
Hold on. Can I just?
Wait a second.
Okay,
Wait a second.
okay.
Who's exploiting?
Uh,
What I'm saying is, it is a
Emotion
blackmail. It is emotional. Epic term, but whatever. It's just you are blackmailing because you are basically saying it's Sudetenland situation. Do you know about Sudetenland? This is basically what Britain and France and Italy and Germany did with Czechoslovakia. They blackmailed it and pressed them to give away land to Germans. By the way, with the same exact reason. They said this is majority Germany. This is majority German people. They speak German. So what the heck, The same reason they
It's
used
not
in
blackmail
Crimea.
when it's not
Majority
your money.
Majority. Wait a minute. I
That's
will
an
done. I
insane thing
will
to
not
say.
talk for a
Okay.
while. Yeah.
Anna, finish
So-
briefly, and then they
Yeah,
do have to
sorry.
respond to this.
So they did the same thing there. By the way, they said majority German. Who cares? France and Britain pushed Czechoslovakia, blackmailed them, and pressed them to give away territory to Germans. Germans said, "Of course, we were not going to invade entire Czechoslovakia. No fucking way. We will stop." Guess what? They didn't. They annexed the entirety of Czechoslovakia, then proceeded to divide Poland and attack them with Soviet Union from
Can you
both
make an
sides.
argument,
And-
please?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. That's the argument.
You're just,
That's
That's
what
the
he
you're just
wants. He
stating
argument.
your
wants us to give
worldview of
away
history.
land.
You're not
Fabian,
responding
stop.
to any
Yeah.
arguments.
Fabian, stop. Non-smoker can respond. Non-smoker was addressed. Non-smoker was accused of blackmail. I gotta let him respond to that, right?
Okay.
That
Not him
accusation.
particular. People who has that ideology.
Yes.
Yeah,
And then,
not-
and
yeah, I
then,
don't think
and then
he's a
we'll move on.
blackmailer.
Right.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say I'm not blackmailing anyone. I'm not, responsible for the flow
You're
of
not
this
a
fucking
politician,
money.
obviously,
But,
yeah.
but what I do want to say is if anybody's guilty of blackmailing anyone, it's the people in my fucking government. Because of course they're giving this aid on conditions. Do you not understand that? Do you think that
I
we're
know,
doing this for
yeah.
goodwill? Do you think
No,
that we're doing
of
this to
course.
help Ukraine? That we really care about Ukraine?
No.
Because that's a
Help
total
blackmail.
bullshit
I'm done,
narrative. We want to have a buffer state. That's all we give a fuck about. That's all that's ever mattered to America. And I've
Not allies with our
always resented that line that like when I debated Dylan, which was almost a year ago, he had said, "Oh, we're helping out a budding democracy, like when the French helped the Americans in the American Revolution," which is fucking insane. It's like Dude,
True.
the fact of the matter is, we're not in this because we think Ukraine is a budding democracy. We're in this because we think Ukraine is an incredibly fragile country, right, with a very corrupt ruling class that can be easily manipulated. And if it wasn't us manipulating them, it would probably be the Russians manipulating them, like they had been doing. Right?
And we
It's
also want to
unfortunate-
take Russia
it's
down a
unfortunate
peg
for
through them,
Ukrainians.
by the way. That's another reason. We all want
What
to take Russia down a
great,
couple
dude.
pegs because we don't like Russia.
Okay.
Russia bad.
We're going to go
Good
to.
way.
we're
Good
gonna
good
get
job.
back on-
Unlike them, you know.
We're gonna get back on track.
They're fascist fucks.
We're gonna go to Woo, and then we're gonna go to Dylan.
All right.
So go ahead.
Wick, I would appreciate your help with not getting interrupted as I'm making this point because I want to go through a few things. Anna, first of all, I want to tell a really brief story. There was one Saturday I was out here in America. I jumped in my convertible. I went out. I had a great day. I went for a run. Went and got like a McDonald's hamburger. I come back home and you'd responded to one of my DMs showing me pictures of Russians literally sabotaging civilians' apartments with mines and showing me some evidence of war crimes. And I just think as we're doing this panel, I really think it's important to show Anna some respect. And I think making cynical remarks about her father, I don't think that's an appropriate way to behave. I'm personally very sorry you went through that. And I think you deserve better. I'm sorry for that. I want to come back to a meta point that I feel has been made on this panel over and over again. And I think there's kind of a false assumption here that there are two options, right? We either help Ukraine or we don't help Ukraine, right? And I'm fully willing to cede for everyone here on this panel, there are enormous downsides to us supporting Ukraine, right? There's definitely increased geostability, decreased geostability there. Putin has repeatedly threatened to use nuclear options. Like, there are real downsides here. I think the difference in our perspectives is I make an assessment that's about 4 steps down the line. Because we tried this in Obama when we made the decision to do nothing when Putin came and annexed Crimea, right? We tried appeasement, we tried sanctions. Putin put trillions of dollars aside to essentially make Russia a self-propagating economy and isolate them from sanctions measures across the world. We tried this strategy of appeasement and it didn't work. So the assessment that I make is where we're going to be 1 year, 3 years, 5 years from now, is that Putin has said over and over, he does have this dream of restarting Russia. He is weaker than I think people give him credit for. And I think the way he's trying to appear strong and keep power, so frankly, people in his own government don't murder him, is I think it's going to end up pushing into these other countries, which is why everyone's in a rush to join NATO. So I agree with y'all that there does need to be an adult discussion at some point, trying to bring some peace to this situation. And if you're anti-Ukraine, I'm not. But the truth is, political support for Ukraine, unfortunately, is weakening in Germany and it's weakening here in the United States. There is going to be a day where that happens, and there's going to be there's going to be a negotiation one way or another. So I don't think there's this choice that's going to be a forever war, or we have to just pack up and go home right now. I think y'all are making a very faulty assumption about what the consequences are if we do nothing. And I think that's really understated here.
So I was called out directly. Can I respond to this?
Briefly, yes.
Yeah. So in terms of you apologizing for me, fuck off. But mostly, if someone is going to bring up the fact that their father was killed, and then I ask for the date, and they give the date after Boris Johnson and the West tanked negotiations that would have saved that person's life, then yeah, I'm going to fucking say it. I'm not going to bring up information I have about family members beforehand, but if you're going to use it as a means to support your argument and then say it's off limits, the thing that you brought up into the panel, no, I want your dad to be alive. I want other people to be alive because I'm against fucking war.
Okay, it's not off limits, but we
brave.
aren't going
And-
to litigate
Against
this. This is not the debate, right? So
Yes.
I didn't kick you because it's not an off limits thing. But again, this isn't the debate. We're not going to debate about someone's dead father.
Oh no, I got 20 other things to go and debunk everybody, but it's Dylan's turn.
It is Dylan's turn.
And caps and optics, name a better duo. I think earlier somebody said or they a little bit like ha-ha'd at the idea that the Russians want to rebuild the Soviet Union. I don't think the Russians want to rebuild the Soviet Union as a communistic dictatorship or something like that, or Marxist Leninist say they don't want to do that. But I wouldn't blame anybody for thinking they would, considering how much they use the symbology of the Soviet Union, how much they praise the Soviet Union. But Vladimir Putin is very much an adamant anti-communist. But the Russians have been pretty open when it comes to at least internally, when it comes to their foreign policy establishment, and when it comes to books that many of members of the establishment has written, and that their foreign services talked about, that they want to dominate the post-Soviet sphere. They want to dominate in Belarus, they want to dominate in Kazakhstan, they want to dominate in Tajikistan, they want to dominate in Ukraine, Moldova, Romania, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. These are all states that they want to dominate in. Now, domination doesn't necessarily mean invading and conquesting and like taking like the villages and burning them to the ground.
So do we, but wait, hold on. We want to dominate them too, by the way. So you're forgetting that. Like, you're just Russia. We don't want any influence in the region, I guess, according to you.
Well,
So that's weird.
usually how it works is if a country says, I want to do a trade deal with you, you can say yes or you can say no. It's not usually you do a trade deal with us, or we're going to use economic coercion to stop 25 to 50% of your trade. And you know what? On top of that, we're maybe going to invade you if you do not enter our economic union. That's something that I draw the line at. Nation states are allowed to have trade deals and join alliances, but I do draw the line at invading somebody for their economic resources. I think it's wrong when the United States does it. I think it's wrong when Russia does it, and I think it should be corrected. As for, I don't want to go back to Anna's father, but I want to talk about the ideas behind it. What you're saying, Fabian, is dependent upon the idea that number one, that the negotiated settlement that was talked about at that time would have stopped the violence, that it would have stopped it, and then, everything would have been fine. Violence wouldn't have flared up again a year from now. When we have seen time and time again that this keeps getting kicked down the road when it comes to the Minsk Accords, when it comes to any number of negotiations where they don't deal with the fundamental issues, they don't deal with what's fundamentally at stake here, and it just kicks the violence down to another generation of Ukrainians. And so instead of it being Anna's father, it'd be somebody else's father 5 to 10 years from now.
Yep.
And so if I am of the idea that we should be dealing with this now. So
But let him
Is there
finish, and then
not
Fabian,
a
you respond.
0+ chance when it is
Yes,
intentionally
do whatever
taken
the fuck you want.
versus a 0+ chance versus there was a chance? It's not. My argument doesn't depend upon the fact that when the negotiations were intentionally tanked, that means that the negotiations would have gone well. My argument is they can't go well if you intentionally tank them, and they might.
What you're saying
go
about
well
intentionally
if you don't.
tank? Let me ask you a question. What was the security guarantees, the concrete security guarantees that Ukraine would have gotten out of that negotiated settlement?
None.
Well, I mean,
That's
Putin
right.
wasn't even involved yet. So
There was no
guaranteed.
concrete security guarantees in the
There
proposal.
was nothing. Yes.
Why if there's no concrete security guarantees for Ukraine in the proposal, why should they accept it? What could stop the Russians from saying, sure, yeah, I'm in favor of peace, then they lick their wounds for a year because they fucked up the early invasion and launch it again once they're prepared, and the Ukrainians will not have the element of surprise and the Russians being, the Russians.
Again, Putin wasn't even involved yet. Nothing had been signed. Like you're saying, that hadn't been hashed out yet.
What? So there was no security. So what was the security guarantee that they were going to? So there was no security guarantee in the proposal. So how was it? Wait, it's shot down. So you're telling me that this was shot down by Boris Johnson? So to be clear, it was shot down by Boris Johnson, but it also wasn't far along enough to even have any security guarantees, if it was going to have that in the first place.
Again, there's a 0+ chance, right, that the war could have ended. When you intentionally tank them and say we're not going to negotiate, we're going to fund this war, then obviously negotiations end and the war continues. The idea of like debating about the technicals of the ongoing peace negotiations is fucking stupid. They weren't complete.
So if you're just saying that negotiated settlement didn't work, it didn't go through, it didn't finish because Boris Johnson said, I don't like this. And a bunch of other people, by the way, said it doesn't like this. It wasn't just Boris Johnson. There were objections from the Ukrainian side as well. And because of that, now we're supposed to say that this was the one chance of peace that was dashed. There was a million different interactions
I
with
didn't
the
say there
Turkish
was- this was
ambassadors
the
and other
one
ambassadors
chance.
where there was a million different interactions where they could have accepted Russian demands, but the Russian demands were too maximalist. They were too absurd for not only Western alliance structures, but for the Ukrainians themselves. And again, no negotiated settlement should be reached until Ukraine has concrete security guarantees that would stop another war from happening. The Russians have given their word on not invading Ukraine multiple times. In 2008, Vladimir Putin said after
this is all
invading,
bullshit.
this is not bullshit. When the Russians invaded Georgia in 2008, and Vladimir Putin was asked about Ukraine, he said, "There's no ethnic issue in Crimea. There's no ethnic issue in Ukraine, and we're not going to invade Ukraine." When 2014 happens, and they finally do invade Crimea, they say they're not doing it the entire time. In the lead up to the 2022 invasion, they say they're not going to invade. They're not going to invade. They're not going to invade, gaslighting us the entire time, trying to negotiate while also at the same time they're not invading, which is kind of hard to do in and of itself. And then they invaded after lying time and time and time again. So for me,
Your argument is that the Russians are liars, and so no peace negotiations can be trusted.
I'm not. What I'm saying,
it's okay to
you
tank
can
it?
you can negotiate with people who can't be trusted, but you can only do it if you have concrete thing backing your demands. For example, you cannot just take the Russians at their word alone. There has to be something else that's going to hold them to account if they're to break the alliance, if they're to break the agreement, if they're to break the treaty, whatever is made after this.
Let me ask directly,
It's a
to
non-argument.
Fabian, to Scott. Do you honestly think, in your heart of hearts, that Russia had any intention of peace, or do you think
my
that they
heart
were
of
going
hearts?
to go in? That they were going to go in no matter what?
When?
What do you mean when?
Well, I mean, you're saying they were
You
going
think
to
that
go in no
even
matter
if
what?
you kick
When?
the
What are you
can
talking
down the
about?
road, even if this peace deal had, for whatever reason, Ukraine had ceded to all the demands that Russia was making for peace, do you not think that a year, 2 years, 5 years down the road that they would just do it again and carve off another piece like they did with Crimea?
I don't.
Like they did with-
Listen. I don't have a fucking crystal ball. Nobody here does.
No, you
right?
don't, but you do have a pattern of behavior that you can
Yeah,
observe.
I have a pattern.
You do
I have
a
another
record
pattern.
of actions where
So-
Putin has
so
engaged
here you go,
in this
here you
time
go.
and time again, right?
So I have a pattern of behavior of Western intervention since the 1990s, promising not to do NATO expansion, bringing in Jeffrey Sachs.
There's a whataboutism. That's all this is.
No, this isn't a whataboutism.
Yeah.
You say
It
what's
is.
the
It
pattern
is.
of
It
behavior of
is.
Russia?
It literally
No,
is. It's a
this is
definition
not
of whataboutism.
No, what I'm saying is I'm supposed to predict 3 or 4 years in the future what Russia will do, and what I'm demonstrating is that what Russia has done has many times been dictated by Western involvement. And when the West comes in the 90s and says, "Hey, we're going to privatize, we're going to help you privatize like we did in Poland," and then they tank all of that and they allow everything to be gobbled up by the oligarchs, and they bring 2 million people that are in poverty before and then 60 million people in poverty afterwards through the privatization that magically, worked okay for Poland but didn't work for Russia because Western power structures had a certain vision that they want to have. The fact that the West is constantly involved in Ukraine, it honestly, in many ways, might depend upon what the West is doing in Ukraine that might change how Russia plays in that regard. So if we take
when
the
the
West out of it
Russians-
completely, they might not invade. I don't fucking
When
know.
the Russians invaded in 2022, there was no big event that set them off. There was no new provocation from the West that changed the balance, that forced their hand. There was no chance of Ukraine joining NATO in 2022.
Wait. Wasn't it because of Ukrainian
There was-
troops on the border or something? I thought that wasn't that a big one?
They're always
They
doing
didn't
that.
move
I
their troops
have-
on the border or some shit.
No, it was not. No, that did not. No, that is not why Russia did not invade because
No.
of Ukrainian troop provocations on the border. The Russians have talked about NATO expansion, but Ukraine couldn't have joined NATO in 2022. Not only because of the fundamental treaty saying that you cannot allow new members to join as they have territorial disputes, active territorial disputes with other nations, meaning just they couldn't join because of the rules. But there's also another nation states that were holding up the process, like France, Germany. You think Viktor Orban was going to give a thumbs up to Zelensky joining? He still hasn't given a thumbs up to Zelensky joining, objecting over like Hungarian schools in the west of the country. So I see the Russians going for new attempts to conquer Ukraine, new attempts to take over territory of Ukraine. They've been doing this since 2003. When it comes to the, I think the Tuzla crisis, the island near the Kerch Bridge in 2003, this has been something that Vladimir Putin's administration has been building up time and time and again. And it happens irrespective on many occasions of what the West's actions are.
No,
And
it
so I
does.
think
It does
that
fucking
so
matter.
what
That
I'm
is so
saying,
dumb. That's so dumb.
I don't believe that we can just isolate this and say, oh, it's NATO expansion, when the NATO expansion question in 2022
No,
wasn't moving anywhere.
No,
Okay, I
you're,
wanna-
you're,
I
you're,
wait,
you're
can I-
nailing
can I-
it.
Also,
Stop,
by the way,
stop.
I gotta say, I waited a very long time. I have so many notes. I want to say one more thing. I also want to respond to Omni and a bunch of other people. But I'll just respond to one more thing.
On this discussion, but yes,
Also,
briefly,
I
go
just even if the war ended during that Boris Johnson negotiation, or let's say a negotiation months after, that doesn't necessarily mean that death stops. We have seen the Russians engage in quote unquote cleansing operations,
Yep.
their words, not mine, in the Kiev Oblast, where they went door to door, finding military-age males who are in some way associated with the government, in some way associated with maybe Ukrainian nationalism or some other ideology or something pro-government, pro-Zelensky. They took them outside and they shot them in the back of the head, dumped them on the side of the road. The reason why they were so blatant in it is because they expected to win. And so if they get their semi-victory, whatever you want to call it, and they get to hold on to tons of Ukrainian territory, I have no reason to believe that they're not going to engage in that same exact behavior in occupied territory, as they're already currently pushing out anybody with a deep sense of Ukrainian identity from occupied territory, trying to force Russian passports on them or deport them.
Okay.
But why are
I
they
can be
doing that?
very
Dylan?
quick in my response because he
Well, I
called out
want-
like every point I
Very
made.
quick,
Like,
then Omni, but then I also have to take a bio break, unfortunately. And so you're gonna have to give me like 30 seconds. So please no slurs while I'm gone. So that's the order we're gonna go. Quick response from Scott, then Omni, then Anna and Dylan. But yeah, I'll be right back.
yeah, so we keep dragging this back to like NATO expansion is the only thing that we're saying. We're not saying NATO expansion is the only thing. And you keep saying, well, I don't see one definitive thing.
So what else in
that
2022
causes-
happened?
Let me finish. I don't see one specific thing that leads to this, as if it's like you're pretending like it's an actual chessboard, and I need to point out the exact moment that Ukraine put Russia in check or vice versa, so that we like moved for a rook's castle. Like that's not how things work. Like you can bring up war crimes and horrible things that the Russians have done, and I agree, right? I don't fucking like war, and at the same time, I can say, well, hey man, you know what might be a provocation? Well, I don't know. After they took over Crimea, cutting off fucking 88% of their water supply, like that's been something that has been sticking point for Russia for a long time. When you're cutting off water that constitutes 72% of all the water that you needed to irrigate for farmland in the area. And then you could go back tit for tat and say, well, that's not their fucking land to begin with. But the fact of the matter is that Crimea's vote and many of the votes that left over after the, I don't know which we'll call it the Ukrainian Revolution. You can call it the Maidan Revolution, whatever. Unconstitutional votes. I mean, there have been tons and tons of corrupt things that Ukraine has done that aren't necessarily direct provocations, but this is an instability and corruption in the region with two powers playing and vying for control over this resource-rich area, and it's the Ukrainians that are getting fucked every time. And I want to stop that, not fucking continue in the name of defeating Russia.
Yeah.
So
How do you stop
I
that?
just
Yeah,
I
that
just
makes a lot of sense.
I just want just one last thing, and since Wick is gone, oh, never mind, Wick's
I'm
back. I
back.
can't. I just
Okay, where are we at?
Just-
Fabian just went.
We're having a
we'll
panel
just-
about Russia and Ukraine.
yeah. So just quickly, Fabian, my point is violence doesn't end when the war is officially gone into peace. When World War I ended, a lot of violence in Europe continued all across the continent through the Freikorps and all types of other stuff. And I'm just saying that sometimes the peace deal that you negotiate, even if you've negotiated a peace, can cause more violence in the long run or even in the immediate term, as there's going to be violence in Russian occupied territory from guerrillas who are horrified that the government actually signed away their territory. There's going to be violence from the government who's going to go door to door finding people who oppose them, and they're going to shoot them. People on lists, which people laughed about when they talked about in the press before the Russian invasion, but then it happened. The lists were real. And so
Yeah, I agree.
just because you negotiate
No,
a
I
peace
agree.
doesn't mean that the violence is going to stop.
I agree. There are a lot of murders in Chicago. That doesn't mean we should fucking invade it.
I
Flynn
want.
responded. Okay.
I want to.
Not serious.
First of all, I want to read a few super
Nobody
chats
cares.
before we go to Anna, and so I'm gonna read a few super
Wait,
chats.
hold up, wait. I was supposed to
Did
go.
Omni not get your chance yet?
No,
Then-
no, I didn't.
Okay,
No.
then Omni, then Anna. That's where we'll go. Drexel says $5 to the panel. The U.S. will undoubtedly put bases in Ukraine after investing so much aid if we push Russia back. That's a point. Boris Gaganilov says for $10 BGN, Putin is a genocidal imperialistic Russian. In 1945, they did the same thing they were doing in Ukraine, in Bulgaria and Romania: genocide, installing communism, death, suffering, concentration camps, etc. Curtis Morick for $5.50 in funny Canadian money. Fabian is a clown. Take your L and go back to not realizing your ideology. $5 from Mudra Garwal. To the anti-Ukrainian side, what is the one piece of evidence that would convince you Russia is in the wrong? Omni, then Anna, go ahead.
So I mean, yeah, everything that Dylan said, like you said, what was it that Russia has been invading? What was it, like Ukraine specifically, or countries since like 2003 or something like that?
What?
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, but I guess you're not either not remembering or you never. Wait, what? Did you not just say that?
No, I said that Russia has been interested in taking Ukrainian territory since 2002 with the Tuzla crisis, when they were trying to build a dam in order to take islands that internationally belonged to Ukraine. That was when, during the earlier stages of Putin's administration, when they started testing the waters on questions of Ukrainian sovereignty.
Okay, all right, well, okay, regardless, anyways, my point still is going to still stand. Like, you say that, like, they've been interested in that since, like, 2003. But like either you don't remember or you just don't know that like America has been interested in this whole region, including Ukraine, since 1992, since the fall of the USSR.
Including Russia.
We've been giving billions of dollars in funds to Ukraine since then in order to influence them to make them more dependent upon us. And not only that, but we also helped cause the whole collapse of the USSR, which caused obviously these countries to exist in the first place before that. So I mean, you guys. And everything that before Dylan's monologue, everything that Fabian said was completely fucking true. And this is like something that you guys don't understand. You guys are like giving all the like, like the agency or the blame to like Russia and Putin, but you're just not. You simply refuse to acknowledge any. You simply refuse to acknowledge any blame from the West that it caused this, and you refuse to like admit that like the West has a vested interest in this entire region and controlling it, which they do.
So we gotta do just pause for a moment. We gotta do some housekeeping here. Brianna Wu has to go. She has something she needs to get to. So just a brief closing statement, and then
I had minor surgery this morning. I'm still recovering from the anesthesia, but I didn't want to leave my friends here, Anna and Dylan, by themselves. I'm about to go pass out. I just wanted to say before I leave, you know, this is honestly a really hard discussion to listen to. I understand after Iraq and Afghanistan, there's a real decline in trust that America can solve problems or be a force for good in the world. I grew up in Mississippi. We had more people served there per capita in those wars. I had many friends die. I literally protested George Bush every single day for a year out in Colorado. So I understand that cynicism. But I just want to say one of the things that if you really study Putin, how he operates, is he doesn't try to tell Americans that like democracy is bad. He tries to convince the rest of the world that all politics is corrupt and as pointless as it is in Russia. And I just don't think that's true. Just because the boomer leadership in American politics profoundly fucked this country up, that doesn't mean that every single choice going forward is going to be like that. I do think the choice to support Ukraine is the right one. I think there's a reason both the left and the right agree on this. And Anna, I want to let you know as we're going into the 2024 cycle, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure the American people understand what's at stake. So thank you. It's been a pleasure being here.
I hope you feel better soon. Thank you for coming as long as you can. Really appreciate it. Anna,
so
pass the mic to you real quick.
Oh wait, but can I respond to Omni about what he said?
Yeah, Dylan, go on.
So I didn't mean to imply that 2003 is when the history of American or like Russian relations with Ukraine began. What I was saying is that in 2003 is the example of Putin's government trying to encroach upon Ukrainian territory after signing agreements to respect Ukrainian territory in order for them to give up the nuclear arsenal. And this was before the 2004 NATO expansion of Romania and other states in the region that creeped NATO to its borders. And so my point is that I do think that there were plans. Maybe he wouldn't have gone through with the plans in a different world. It's impossible to say. But I do think there were plans and interests at the heart of the issue, at the heart of Putin, looking towards invading, conquering, or at least controlling Ukraine. I think if he could have controlled the government in Ukraine, maybe he wouldn't have done this in the first place. But one way or the other, the Russians believe that Ukraine, ideologically, is a part of their country. They believe that if it is not directly part of their country, it has to be an extension of their soft power, hard power, and economic force. The United States has obviously been involved in Ukraine before. In the 1960s, we funneled money through the CIA into Ukrainian nationalist organizations. This is open history. You can Google this. This has been revealed to the public. This is true. But I do think there is a major difference between funneling the billions of dollars you're talking about, which went into anti-human trafficking operations, went into, I believe some of it was literally just border patrol, which went into infrastructure projects. That type of money.
Democracy building. That's a one. Yeah, I mean.
Okay, but you put parentheses. What was democracy building? What was bad about? What was that we gave money to that was democracy building that was bad? Because you put it in like parentheses.
Well, what usually happens when America does that to countries?
Well, not what usually happens. What happened?
Now with Ukraine.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say that I haven't read that much about this specific thing, but I have read a little bit about it. Okay.
Okay. What did you read?
Well, I mean, from what I've read, like we gave these billions of dollars, and one of the things was democracy building, which I mean, the problem I think with it is that from what I have read at least.
Well, what is it?
Is it? Wait, what? What are you talking about?
What? No, what is like? What did the money go to? What was democracy building in Ukraine? Because that's very vague. Democracy building. What the fuck does that mean? You brought it up. What is it?
I mean, yeah, I assume. Again, I didn't read that deeply into this one single thing. All right, I had to read into a bunch of things.
Why'd you bring it up?
I did invite you a week ago to this, right? So you've had about a week.
Yeah. Okay. Any fucking ways. I'm talking to Dylan here, but okay. I mean, like, from what I had read about this one specific issue is that, like, we gave. I think it's when we gave them money to like civil. What are they called? Civil. What are those things called? I can't remember what they're called, but
civil society organizations.
Yeah. That's it. And we probably gave it.
Okay.
Probably gave it directly to the Ukrainian government. But the problem that I had read about it is that we did this like everything that we fucking do everywhere, really, including this region. We gave them all this money, not out of the fucking goodness of our hearts, like you motherfuckers seem to believe somehow. We didn't give this out. We didn't just give them blank checks out of the goodness of our hearts.
I'm not asking about the intention.
Could you shut the fuck up and let me finish?
But you're not answering my question. You're not answering.
I'm getting there. If you fucking shut the fuck up,
you're not gonna get there.
Yes, I am.
Then get there.
Just shut the fuck up and let me finish. How about? And then you'll hear it. Okay.
I won't.
All right. Cool. Good. So as I was saying, we did not give all these billions of dollars to Ukraine just to give it to them out of the goodness of our hearts. We gave it to them in order to influence them and to make them and more dependent upon us and less dependent upon Russia, so that we could influence the entire region. We could have more control over it, and so that we can expand our sort of imperial influence over this region.
Okay.
Yes, that is why we did it. And that is why we do that in every country that we do this shit.
So let me just I'm sorry. I would just like to I'll repeat the.
We need to
1 second.
Anna, we need to
okay, I will. Okay, wait. Don't worry. I'm just going to repeat the question. He's not going to answer it again, and we'll be done. So what?
I just answered it. What the fuck are you talking about?
What was democracy building in Ukraine? What did the money go to? What did we do? You didn't answer that question. You just said a bunch of vague. Like, well, it was all to control Ukraine through. But no, what did the money go to? Because money obviously had to go somewhere. Had to do something.
To a lot of different fucking things. I don't know these specifics because again, I didn't read this one specific. I didn't read fucking 10 studies on this one specific thing. All right, how about you just answer it then if you have.
So, if I told you, for example, that we sent $10 billion to China in order to engage in revolutionary efforts against the Chinese government, and you were like, what was that? It's like, I don't know, like. Well, I mean, we like obviously we don't like China. It's like at that point, it's like, okay, you didn't do any digging on this. You just like read a headline.
I mean, I read a couple of articles on it. Okay, what did it say in the articles?
Okay, what did it say in the articles?
I just told you. I just told you, dude.
It
Read
said
it.
that we gave them
I mean,
money to control them. That's all it said.
It doesn't
in
matter.
order to increase their
done.
dependency upon us
Yeah,
and
I
not
think
on
we
Well,
will
Russia.
let him go. Let
Yeah.
him go,
If you,
dude.
I don't know if you're aware, but Ukraine was literally part of fucking Russia and the Soviet Union before
You don't
1992.
say.
So it's almost
didn't
like
want
they
to
have
be.
a history together or something. And we
Thank you
wanted
for-
to
Yeah.
reverse their influence and increase ours so that we can control this region like we control half the fucking planet besides that.
I appreciate your
Do you
in-depth
do
research
get
you
it?
did for
Do
this
you get it
topic.
now? Do you understand?
Well, no, I didn't know about the Soviet Union
Was
before.
it
then, thank
slow
you.
enough for your ass or what?
Well,
Jesus
I mean,
Christ, dude.
you can go as slow as you want. You still won't know what the money went to or anything about it. But
Anna, the non-smoker.
But do you? Can you answer that?
a lot of it went through the
Mr.
like
Expert.
the national. Yeah, for example, the biggest one that people talk about all the time is the National Endowment for Democracy, which would funnel money, for example, journalist organizations. It would funny money to like, for example, like freedom of the press or like civil rights organizations that talk about like judicial reform, like stuff like that. And we gave it about, I think, maybe $3 million.
That's not what
That's-
I had read, but okay, sure. Wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
whatever.
so what did you read?
This is okay. We've I think we've demonstrated this. I think this has run its course. Anna, non-smoker. Go ahead.
So much have been said. I'm not a debater. It's first time I'm doing such a thing, so I apologize if I can't, address anything. But I would like to point out that plenty of people seem to be under assumption that Ukrainian-Russian relations were very sweet and nice before NATO and America, decided to jump in and ruin this beautiful harmony we had. So point is, did not NATO exist in 19th century? Did it exist then? Because back then Russians colonized us. They tried to destroy our identity several times. They prosecuted our language. They did pretty much everything, almost every century we have been a part of them, to eliminate us as people. And they continue to do so. For them, it's very crucial. It goes back to quite a long time ago, which I'm not going to go in now, which is Kievan Rus, and, quite a lot of history there, which goes back to the importance of them keeping this position as the Ruski, as Russian people, as descendants of Kievan Rus. For them, subjugating Ukraine, as I told before, and Belarus is essential. For them to keep their identity is to keep us part of Russia, part of Russian world, which you guys don't know, and it's fine. It's not your problem. I
No,
understand.
I did
And-
know that. What are you fucking talking?
Yeah,
knew all
of course.
this.
Can I
Yeah,
ask you a
you
question?
know a lot of things.
It-
You know a
Can
lot
I
of
ask you a
things.
question?
I
Yeah,
see
And it
that.
will
I
actually
did.
be a
I'm
question.
not fucking
Like-
dumb American. I don't know anything. No, I knew this shit. All right.
Okay.
Just 1 second, and then the question, okay?
To
So
clarify your-
Americans
yeah.
sent. Of course, yeah. Ask. Of course. I'm sorry. Ask.
No,
What do you want?
it's what you're saying is that there is a long history, which I don't think any of us deny. A long history
Yeah,
of,
sure.
of issues and invasions and empires. I mean, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be the guy, but fuck it, I'll say it. The Holodomor. Like, there's
Yeah.
an incredibly long history of the Russian desire for an empire. But
Yeah.
if your
Execution,
argument,
right? Terror, Stalin.
right,
Everything.
right,
Yeah.
and of course, right, and then of course there's Russian stuff with. I'm not going to get into that. Anyways, so if your argument is that there is this intrinsic nature of Russia, despite being communist, when it was no matter what form of government it took on, that there is an intrinsic nature of Russia that creates this desire for empire and desire for
Yeah,
expansion,
imperialism. Yeah.
and desire for destruction, right?
As if they're
it
the only
sounds
country
like-
that does that, by the way. Like
No, no,
every
they're
major
not.
country
Yeah.
does this shit.
Let me
America did it.
let me get through
Okay,
this.
let Fabian get to his
This is-
point, and please get to your
Right.
point.
So, yeah. Well, sometimes things need to be pulled apart, right? And so if that is the case, then wouldn't that be an argument that like no simple resolution in this war, that in order for this to stop throughout history, Russia would need to be so utterly defeated that they're incapable as a power structure of ever being able to invade Ukraine again? It sounds like if that's your rationalization, you're saying this war isn't won just by total victory in terms of resecuring our borders. We must crush Russia so that they are so weak and so disempowered, and then join NATO to where it is impossible for them to invade again. Is that the position that you're putting forward? I'm just curious.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay,
Now's the
yeah,
time to
it
stop
doesn't
them.
seem
There's
that
nuclear
realistic. I
power
wanted to
that
pull
has
it apart.
nukes, by the way. Sure.
It's true, yeah.
Wait,
But
wait, okay. The Soviet Union collapsed. Like, there's been a lot of countries
did.
that have
Yeah.
that have either collapsed, that used to existed with nukes, and then they had nukes. They thought it would guarantee the power, and it didn't. Apartheid South Africa, good example. Soviet Union, another example. Israel thought their nuclear arsenal made them invisible. Lebanon proved that wasn't the case. Same thing for the French in Algeria. The idea that just because somebody has nukes, that means they can't lose like a traditional ground war is a little silly. I mean, the Soviets lost in Afghanistan. We lost in Afghanistan. We lost in Vietnam.
Right, lost
We
in
couldn't
Vietnam.
win in Korea. We couldn't get MacArthur's victory
Yeah,
in
but
Korea.
her argument is that none of that matters because even with the collapse of the Soviet Union, the
I was responding to
Russians'
Omni.
desire. I know, but I'm saying like you're piggybacking here. Like you're like
Yes,
if
I
your
will answer
argument
it,
is that
yeah.
it doesn't matter, right? Then like it ain't even nukes. Like Russia has to be completely destroyed or completely incapable of
no.
invading because of MAD and NATO or something.
Okay, respond.
Let's
Anna?
I super apologize, but the shit is exploding, so I
Oh.
I be careful. If I need to, I go
Yeah, if you
in the
need to
corridor,
go,
but
don't
yeah, but
need,
it's
yeah,
fine.
just cut
Right
whenever
now,
you need.
it's fine. Yeah, thank you. It's far away. It's far away, so it doesn't matter now. So basically, what I was saying is that it is, in a way, the nature of empires to do expansion and imperialism. That's true, yeah. And I do think that Russia, quite frankly, needs to fucking lose for one. And it's important right now because after Soviet Union, despite them aligned with Hitler and doing their thing, they ended up on the winning side eventually. So yeah, unfortunately,
Ukraine
stop,
had forces aligned with Hitler too.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
Not to a
there were
specific
some
extent.
Ukrainian Nazis
Important
collaborators
detail.
there. Just a few.
Okay, let Anna finish, and then we're gonna go non-smoker. That's the order we're gonna go in. Anna,
Very
and then
nice
non-smoker.
thing to say, by the way, because did we
It's true,
fucking
it's
invade
true.
Poland and divided a country? Did we occupy
Yeah.
Baltics, the Ukrainians? No, I don't think so. Stalin did, and Soviet
What?
Union did together with Hitler. What
Talking
the
about
fuck? You don't even
Ukrainian
know that?
Nazis in Ukraine. What are you talking about?
Dude, I'm talking about.
Omni,
not
do you
Molotov
ever
Ribbentrop.
like
I'm
say
talking
anything
about,
of use? Sometimes
Yeah,
I
I
get.
talk about Nazi, Soviet.
You don't agree with it or
treaty
like it,
of
so it's not useful. Yeah, I get it.
non-aggression.
I don't know what your point was.
Okay,
Jesus,
let
that's so
Anna-
silly.
Anna
Just-
My point
yeah,
was
just-
because he's talking about
just-
USSR's
Oh my God.
collaboration with
Omni,
Nazis.
stop!
So I put
Okay, Anna, finish.
Just don't say anything, just by the way, so to say to you, Fabian, right, is your name? I apologize, I don't remember.
You can just call me
Yeah.
Scott. It's fine. Just Scott's fine.
Oh, Scott. Yeah, Scott. Okay, thank you. So, Scott, what you said is yeah, I kind of agree with what you said. That is my point. And Russia needs to lose, and Russia needs to be in some sort of way demilitarized, which is the way you destroy fascist shit. And yeah, there currently are a fascist state, and unfortunately, this ideology is very prevalent amongst Russians themselves, which is a bigger problem than just Putin himself, because just removing Putin from power will unlikely fix shit. It might. We don't know who will take his place in this situation. I personally have zero fucking idea, to be honest with you. It might get worse. It might get better. Nobody knows. But but the point is that Russian imperialism, Russian invasions needs to be addressed. Russism needs to be addressed as a fucking ideology. They need to take accountability for once in their fucking life. What they doing? They have not admitted any genocides they made. They have not admitted their role in anything. Not only just Holodomor, but literally anything. They
The
have
cost
not
of that
been.
victory
Hey,
is
wait.
going to be a lot of dead people that you're advocating.
It's true. Yes, it's true. And this is what we believe. This is what
Man,
we
I'm-
want.
I'm just
But-
saying it's
Has
mass
Ukraine
murder.
apologized for
Omni,
its
just
Nazi collaboration?
Omni, you had your chance. We got to get to more people. Non-smokers
compare.
sitting here, right? Like
Yeah, okay.
non-smokers next. I want to be clear. You guys got to just fucking stop. Okay, Anna,
Uh,
finish.
stupid shit not be no we did collaborate not all of Ukraine, just a small part of UPA, it's called Bandera, Shuhevich, people like that collaborated with Hitler for some time because they saw that as their key to fucking liberate themselves from Bolsheviki and Russian and Soviets who were killing them at the time and deporting them. So I don't stand that, obviously, because fascism sucks in every way possible. Anti-Semitism I don't support. Volynska Rezня I don't support, which what they did with Polish civilians. That's all true, but this is a very small segment of Ukraine. Not to mention that also other people do that. IRA collabed with
Look,
fucking Germans.
you don't have to. You don't have to
It's
apologize. right?
another point.
I was
Yeah.
just saying, like
Yeah, I
the
don't
tit
have-
for
yeah.
tat is like I don't. I think we
Yeah,
all
I
recognize
understand
that
that.
Russia's done a lot of evil shit. I was only doing a little bit of it because it's like, well, look, we're laying those claims at Russia. It's like, well, it's not like Ukraine's hands are fucking clean either.
Not in any way, fucking shape or form comparable, in my personal opinion. Russia is the imperialist power, the genocider of this region. Anyone will tell you in Eastern Europe, whatever it is, Baltic, whatever it is, Poland, that is the truth. That is a major power. That it is.
To me.
Okay.
Oh, you think so? Yeah, but that's what you took out of that. Well, yeah, it's pretty silly. Yeah, pretty silly. Despite that, I said that I do not support what UPA was doing, but that's not enough for you. IRA was collabing with Hitler because they saw that as liberation of against British, not British, sorry, against English. So, many people like us did, but it's not the point. The point is fucking Stalin. He signed a fucking treaty and separated Poland between the two. They both attacked it from the west and the east. They also occupied like half the fucking continent after the World War II. What the fuck are we even talking about?
Yeah, and did the most
era?
to beat the Nazis, and the most of them died out of anybody. Sure.
Oh, you think? And Ukrainians didn't do shit, right? Yeah, whatever, right?
Well, they were a part of the USSR.
Stop. We need to pass it to non-smoker.
Remove the person. Yeah, so anyhow, I just can't finish my fucking point. Just one thing. I agree with what you said about, how much it will take. And it might take quite a lot, that's for sure. Yeah, no denying that. But, for us, it's now the only chance because we now finally have support. We now finally have enough power to actually fight back. Every previous Russian resistance to Russia of Ukrainians ended up in us being slaughtered. So now, we have some power to fight back. And now we have to use it because our people, our soldiers say only one thing. I don't want my children, I don't want my grandchildren to experience what we are experiencing right now. So for us, it's the most important thing. And we're willing to sacrifice our lives. It's not for you to decide whether we are willing to do it or not. It is for you to decide whether to support it. That's true, because it's, your money, your Americans, that's for you to decide. But it is not for you to decide what we're trying to do. It's not vengeance.
Okay.
It's safety. It's protection.
Okay. We're going to pass it to non-smoker. I'm sure we're all going to get into it, I'm sure. Non-smoker, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. I've been remarkably well behaved this debate, by the way. I just want to say that for myself.
I'll give you a good
Please, I deserve it. Okay, look. There's so much shit that was said that I want to respond to point by point. So I'll try to make it quick. I know that Dylan mentioned way earlier about the whole Soviet Union 2.0 thing. Like, well, Putin uses Soviet symbology and all that kind of stuff. The Soviet Union was nearly 75 years of Russian history. It's like a really significant part of their history. And Putin also uses Orthodox Christian symbology. The whole idea is like these are big unifying, symbols that bring the Russian people a sense of, togetherness and meaning. And more importantly, maybe I think it reminds most Russians of like a more positive time in Russian history, because following the collapse of the Soviet Union. Just God damn it, come on.
Sorry.
So
sorry,
then,
my bad.
I think we can all agree, I hope we can all agree that the 1990s for Russia was like a pretty horrible fucking time, and most people seem to have projections of shock therapy killing anywhere from like a couple 100,000 to maybe even millions of people in Russia. So the Russians having nostalgia for the Soviet Union, I think that's not evidence of Soviet Union 2.0 being built right now. I think that's evidence of, hey, we're trying to utilize old symbols that associate the Putin regime with like a good time in Russian history. The whole thing that Omni got into with the NGOs, or I guess the Western funding into Ukraine and all that stuff, Dylan mentioned, he's correct. It's NED funding, I think, was the thing we're all looking for. The last I had heard, it's over like $20 million fucking dollars that was spent across both the Orange Revolution and Maidan. There were a number of things that money was spent for. No, I don't have a fucking receipt for every dollar spent, but it's clear that the whole NED's initiative is to promote democracy, and they managed to succeed in that to the tune of Ukraine being ranked 122 out of 180 in the World Corruption Index in 2018. So this whole idea that like spending money in these countries to promote democracies is somehow beneficial or can succeed is like a total fallacy. Everybody knows that's bullshit. It's about the West creating destabilization because they can benefit from that, because they can get puppet leaders, right, in who are, Western supporters. It's basically like creating a backdoor into the government. That's always been the West's goal in Ukraine. It's never been about benefiting the Ukrainian people. It's never been about promoting democracy. It's a total fucking lie. It's the same lie we used in every intervention we've had everywhere in the world. And finally, this whole thing about empires and all this stuff that Anna's saying, like, I do want to mention, like, I'm a Finnish American. I do kind of understand this perspective a little bit. But at the same time, most of the world was occupied by empires at some point. The whole idea of nation states is these little, nations of people trying to, against some empire, whatever their historical experience was, express their independence. So, of course, there's going to be a specific resentments between Ukrainians and Russians because of the experience under the Russian Empire and later the Soviet Union and blah, blah, blah. But I don't like this framing that coming from the Ukrainian perspective, we can say, oh, Putin is a uniquely evil, horrible figure, unlike any other imperialist country or any other, world power. It's totally dishonest. I mean, if you look at just even like body counts alone, George W. Bush is like 10 times the killer that fucking Putin ever could have dreamed of being, right? Innocent people, being massacred in Iraq and Afghanistan, rapes, entire cities being destroyed, the formation of ISIS coming out of the invasion of Iraq and the horrible consequences of that for that entire fucking region. I mean, like, I never like that whole idea that, oh, well, it's Russians. You can't trust Russians because look at what they've done in their history. I mean, you can't trust Americans. You can't trust any fucking world power. You know why? World powers care most about their own interests. They don't give a fuck about any other country that they occupy. They don't care who has to die for their own interests to be maintained. So, America doesn't give a fuck about Ukraine either. They never have.
Okay, go ahead if you want to respond, Dylan.
As for the World Corruption Index, I don't know why I used 2018 numbers. The 2022, 2023 numbers shows that they've climbed significantly since when they started, from when we started associating with them and working with them on anti-corruption efforts. I think they've moved up like 30 or 40 places in the anti-corruption index. Now to you, maybe you expected them to move up 100 places in 5, 6, 7 years, but to me, that is significant progress. Is it as fast as I want? No. I think the government should be 10 times more aggressive on corruption. Corruption is an issue here. It is most certainly an issue here that the majority of Ukrainians want to confront, but the United States has helped Ukraine when confronting corruption, whether it's from self-interested reasons and the fact that if you want to give aid to someone, they have to be not that corrupt, so they use the aid instead of selling the aid. You can even make a self-interested argument for it. But Ukraine has improved on corruption, and Ukraine has improved on the issue of democracy as well, democratization. With the last election that having in Ukraine in 2019, all of the election monitors universally said that the exit polling seemed to match what the polling was going into the race, and that the results that were officially announced also matched exit polling, that there was no kerfluffle or like rigging of the vote. So I do think Ukrainian society is advancing. Is it going as fast as people here would like? Probably not. Isn't it going as fast as I would like? Probably not. But Rome wasn't built in a day, and democracies are difficult. They're wild experiments that are great in my opinion, but take time and effort to build. As for the idea that there's a war of vengeance, no, anytime there's any war, hatred builds up because of the crimes and atrocities that happened during that war. Now, I understand the idea to see a crime and atrocity and think, oh, the reason why Ukraine doesn't want to give up is for revenge. But for Ukrainians, the reason that a lot of them will express to me why they don't want to give up is because they don't want to doom the people in occupied territory to those types of crimes that they've seen forever, with no chance of liberation, with no chance of being helped. And I want to hit on something a while ago that was talked about, and this was the idea. I think Non-Smoker put this idea that Ukraine doesn't have a chance of victory. One of the main reasons why I don't say this is who's winning, this is who's losing, and I don't go to those conclusions is I don't feel very remarkably qualified to be making military statements. The entirety of the world was put flat on their ass when it came to predictions about how this war was going to go. Either A, it wasn't going to happen in the first place, that it does happen, and now that it's happened, it's going to be over in a week. Well, no, it's going to be over in a month. Well, it's going to be over in a few months, in a year and a half. And all these predictions have ended up being wrong, and Ukraine has braked everyone's expectations time and time again. And so, as somebody who, going into this war, thought Ukraine didn't really have much of a chance of any, I thought maybe they would be able to hold the Dnieper River, everything behind it. I am not going to be the one to say that they don't have a chance of victory, and I don't know why anybody would be so positive in saying that they don't have a chance of victory after seeing them exceed expectations every other time that they've been tested during this war.
Yeah, I'm curious, Smoker. Why do you say that? He brought up a good point, right? Why? What is your argument that they don't have a chance to win?
Listen, I've said that this war hasn't been winnable for Ukraine from the start. And my main argument moving forward is Ukraine is entirely dependent on Western support, and Western support will run out. It just will.
What if it doesn't?
Well, I think it will. There's no way that we continue to pour billions and billions of dollars into this for years and years and years.
Well, how do we know that this is going to be a 7, 8, 9-year war?
Dylan, you
before
don't know
eventually-
either. Dylan,
Well,
you don't
no,
know
that
either,
was my
right?
main.
So
That was my main. That was
projection
wait,
the
wait,
American people are not going to tolerate billions and billions and billions of dollars being poured into this conflict. That's why support for Ukraine has waned in the last year.
This
and
is
it
the
will
problem.
continue to wane.
You said I don't know, but you don't know either. But if
Yeah,
I say
neither
I
of us
don't
know.
know, if
Neither
I
of
say
us
I
know.
don't know, I'm not going to say, well, Ukraine's going to lose or Ukraine's going to win. I'm not going to make those bold predictions. Also, we have no reason to. We do not know if this war is going to last 5 years, 6 years, 7 years. This war could end next year if the Russian line breaks and they're unable to reassert dominance in the area. That happened in Kharkiv, for example, where the Russian line was just too thin, it broke, and then the Kharkiv counteroffensive took back a bunch of territory that nobody was expecting. And things like that happen where a lot of information that is private with military commanders is not shared with the public because it's disastrous information.
I can actually clarify why I'm saying that. Okay, I don't think, based on the Ukrainian objectives of reclaiming all territory, including Crimea, that they have any chance of doing that. And I'm pretty confident in that because even with billions of dollars of Western funding, they haven't been able to reclaim the territory taken in 2022. So there's no reason to assume that billions more.
2022, we did.
I'm saying even with all the money we have poured into Ukraine, they still haven't been able to even reclaim just the 2022 borders.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So there's no reason to assume that more and more and more money and more dead Ukrainians will result in somehow this massive turnaround where they're going to not only recapture all the territory they lost in 22, but also Crimea. So based on that criteria, I don't think it's a realistic goal. Now, I might be wrong. I'm willing to admit I might be wrong. That's what I think. That's my prediction, right? But and just one other thing I do want to mention, I think it's important. The corruption perceptions index, I don't know where you got that info from. 2022, Ukraine's rank is 116 out of 180. So it was
it went up.
It's 6 spots. You said like 30 spots.
It's gone up 30 spots in the time since we've been working with them on corruption. Yes,
But,
30 or 40 spots.
So they've gone up 30 spots in the time we've worked on them in the. I just want to be sure because I thought you were saying since 2018 they've moved up 30 spots.
Since we've started working with them on corruption
Since
issues,
2018.
they've made significant progress. Not enough, but they've made significant progress. Now, when it comes to the aid, about half of the aid that has been allocated for Ukraine from not only the United States, but from Germany, from a bunch of these different states, when you see these gigantic numbers of like some people say 100 billion, 200 billion, those people don't know what they're fucking talking about. But when we talk about the money that has actually been allocated, maybe half, 60, maybe 65% of it has actually been delivered. A lot of it still hasn't been delivered. Of the stuff that has been delivered, a lot of it we still haven't even seen in service, especially I think it was like 9 brigades that have been trained on Western tanks, Western equipment that we still haven't seen hit the floor running, where we're expecting to see that counteroffensive in the near future. And again, this is what we've seen in about a year and a half. We've seen 50% of the territory that the Russians have captured recaptured, whether that be the city of Kherson being liberated, whether that be them being pushed back from Kiev, whether that be them getting pushed back from Kharkiv. I just see a situation where the Russians are losing more territory over the long run of this war. And I don't think it's impossible to say, hey, maybe when this new equipment gets introduced, maybe when these new forces are introduced, it breaks the Russian line and they can win. I'm just saying that isn't an impossibility. And none of us are experts enough to really say it is or isn't.
Before we go on, I'm going to read some super chats and we're going to toss it to Anna and then we're going to toss it to Fabian. And that's what we're going to do. Okay, from Hillbillich of Pradisi, I'm butchering that, I'm sorry. This Fabian guy should donate his brain to science. It might be the universe's only truly frictionless object. 10 euros from Prussian Menace. If you read about Russian military reforms since 2014 and look at what units are actually fighting in Ukraine, you can see that they've been prepping for this war ever since Yanukovych was ousted.
Yanukovych, yeah. True.
Apologies for the
Yeah.
yeah. Apologies for
Fuck his name
mispronunciation.
up,
Yeah.
Hate that guy.
Muda Agarwal says, to the anti-Ukrainian side, what is the one piece of evidence that would convince you Russia's in the wrong? $5 for fondue to say it doesn't seem like the pro-Russian side understands that your choices are only as your option. And 5 more euros from Prussian Memes to say non-smoker is a very good-looking man. Smiley face.
Okay, I do want to give them one piece of credit. They aren't pro-Russian, right?
Right.
I don't think Scott and I don't think non-smoker are pro-Russian. They're anti. I disagree with that fundamentally, but I don't think that makes them pro-Russian.
True.
Yeah, I wouldn't describe myself that way. And I actually have issues with lots of people in my community because I don't describe myself that way. But I'm not anti-Ukrainian and I'm not pro-Russian necessarily. I'm anti-war. I'm anti-war and I'm an anti-imperialist and I consider this American imperialism.
But not Russian imperialism, yeah? American.
I don't.
Just
No, I
American.
consider this a Russian response to American imperialism.
This is
Okay.
well then. If we need a point of
very
clarification,
silly,
this is
yeah.
where I disagree.
Just
I think it's
just
both.
one thing, dudes. Couple of things actually. Non-smoker, I think, right, is the name. You said that addressed me, I suppose. That I never said that Putin is the only imperialist in the world or that Russia is unique. I, in fact, qualified several times that this is just an imperialist way of doing things. It is, however, a very unmodern type of imperialism, straight up invasion, annexation of territories, smashing your flags everywhere, genociding the local population, and Russifying them in real time. This is a little bit of a, of a vibe that Russia has, that America, for example, have not participated in quite some time now. Which not to say that America does not do imperialism in much craftier way. It does, obviously, right? But this type of straight up invasion, killing 100,000 people in Mariupol, just destroying, I don't know, maybe 3,000 cities at this point in villages in Ukraine entirely. This is a bit of a different vibe, I must say, and it is way more damage than Iraq was quite for some time. It has not been this long in Ukraine, obviously, but this year and a half, they did just about any war crime you can imagine and killed just about as many as they possibly could. And the only reason they didn't kill more is because we stopped them. So yeah, that's about it. Also, another thing I think also you said, is that what was it? Oh, imperialism. Yeah, like I said, not unique, obviously, but quite a bit more hostile, direct, and I should say 20th century style imperialism is what Russia engages in. Other than that, it is obviously not a war of fucking vengeance. It never was. In fact, before Russia annexed Crimea and invaded Donbass in 2014, most Eastern Ukrainians were pretty sweet on Russia, We forgave all the fucking grievances, Soviet Union collapsed, Russian Empire is a thing of the past, who cares? We tried to live with them peacefully, we tried to coexist, they were very welcome in my city, Kharkiv, for example. You would see a bunch of people from Belgorod here every time. We were very chill, we were very cordial to them, too cordial in my personal opinion, but that's another story. Right now, Belgorod is the city that bombs my city almost every night. Tries to, at least. We're now nuking their missiles quite often. But that's another story. So yeah, this is not a war of vengeance. For us, it's a war of defense and of preserving ourselves as people. For them, it's a little bit of a war of vengeance because we did not do what they want. We did not succumb to their demands. We did not let them pretty much continue be the dominant in our life. And this is the response to it. This is what have been always been their response. Nothing new there. Also about the corruption issue, just very shortly, it is quite a big of a problem, no doubt, obviously, but quite a bit of that corruption, which you guys never say, by the way, is Russian. We have Russian officials, Russian citizens being in top judges, institutions of power, police, whatever the fuck, governance, everything was swarmed by Russians and controlled by them, especially in the East. And it is contributed quite a lot to the fucking corruption because people that were their puppets at the time, such as Yanukovych, for example, and his party, didn't do shit for Ukraine, didn't do anything to improve the situation, to make the institution work. Nothing was working because most of it was just them receiving money from their fucking bosses in Russia and, continue sitting on their asses and doing nothing to improve this country.
So-
And that's
Okay.
just,
Well, he
the
didn't get you into a
Russian
war
issue.
with Russia, that's for sure.
Just to,
Okay.
That's one
Can you say it
thing.
again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you
Go
said.
ahead. Repeat it.
He didn't do you guys into a war with Russia, so there's that.
Yeah,
I mean,
Russia did. Yeah, Russia did. Yeah,
No. That's,
So-
no,
Russia get us
So-
in war with Russia. Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I want to point out is that both Non-Smoker and I believe, and maybe Omnislab, I don't remember, in the very beginning talked about this idea, the inability to have this conversation without being painted as a Russian apologist, as pro-Russian. You see that in the
I didn't say
comments. But you're right, and you're seeing it a little bit here in this discussion, even if it's not
Brianna
outright,
said
you can
it.
see it.
Yeah,
Right, Brianna's, whatever. All right. And I brought up this idea of strategic empathy is something that's really fucking important to actually understand this, right? The commies here might prefer some, historical materialism, but nevertheless, when we talk about shock therapy, when we talk about the IMF and the West coming in and consolidating power with criminals and gangsters to where 7 people own 58% of the Russian economy, and that's the West. When we say, when James Baker says to Gorbachev, quote, "It is important for the Soviet Union and other European countries to have guarantees that if the United States maintains its presence in Germany within the framework of NATO, there will be no extension of NATO's jurisdiction or military presence by a single inch in the eastern direction." When the head of when the Russian ambassador, now head of the CIA, William Burns, says that NATO involvement in Ukraine is Russia's brightest of all red lines, and then we say, but you guys bring that up, what about Russian imperialism? It seems that there is this weird back and forth where we're trying to be painted because we're trying to add the nuance of both forms of imperialism to this discussion, and how it is a shit show with so many things. Like, we talk about corruption. It's like, okay, but the corruption is a problem. Well, it's like, well, yeah, it's a big fucking problem. We still haven't talked about the fucking the human rights violation that was done against people in Crimea by Ukraine, blocking up their water, right? We can talk about the Ukrainian
annexation.
revolution.
After invasion.
Yeah.
Not before.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sure we'll gather up all the leftists in the fucking room in the audience, and we'll ask them, when Israel cuts off water to the fucking Hamas, how fucking happy they are at Israel. It's okay when Ukraine does it, but I guarantee you their opinion will switch when another fucking country that they don't like does it. And again, over and over and over again, like, we are not saying that Russia are the fucking good guys. What we are saying is that Western involvement, as you explicitly stated, is designed to gain power and to gain money and to liberalize under its own corporate structures. There's a reason BlackRock is giving funds to Ukraine to build after the war is complete, because they've made a bet that the West will do everything it can to defend democracy, and then, just like fucking we did with Russia, we'll do with Ukraine. We'll bend you over the fucking ass with loans that fuck you and that allow corporations to
Everything's
control
better than
you
Russia,
until
dude.
you can be our puppet instead of the Russian puppet. The real fact is
We
is
prefer it.
is
If
that
that's
these
our option,
areas,
I prefer it. Sorry.
the southeastern areas of Ukraine, like we have unconstitutional,
I'll be honest.
we have unconstitutional votes that of these places.
Dude, you're delusional. You're delusional. You don't understand what the heck is Russia. You don't understand it. You're comparing fucking oranges and not apples, fucking cactuses. I don't know what the fuck are you comparing. I understand that America is not a fucking benevolent, nice guy. It's obvious. It's fucking obvious. We are fucking post-Soviet people. We don't hold America in some kind of like holy grail, whatever the fuck you think we do. Of course, it has its interests. Of course, those interests are what they care about, not fucking Ukraine. It's politics. We understand it. The only thing you don't understand, supposedly, I'm not sure, but maybe, is the fact that our interests are lies right now. For us, Russia is fucking worse. Do you understand that? It's very simple. We are weak.
So your argument is that you'll choose. Your argument is that you'll choose in your opinion, the lesser of two evils, and you'll sacrifice as many lives as it takes to win the lesser of two evils instead of fighting for peace.
Tell me
What-
this.
oh.
Tell me this, my friend.
Wait.
Scott,
I'm
tell me
sorry.
this.
I'll-
Will you America take away? Will they kill me? Will they take? I'm on the Russian list, by the way. Will they kill me? Will they kill my relatives? Will they forbid me speaking Ukrainian language? Will they forbid me listening to my music, to hymns, to speak with my friends? Will they prohibit
Ukraine
me
didn't have
from
language
any
laws?
of that?
Well, I don't know. The Ukrainian government, that's a puppet
Excuse me?
government, might just
Ban
reinstitute the
opposition
language
political
laws.
parties.
Okay,
Ask
no,
for Daniel.
she is
Idiot.
asking directly, Fabian, Scott. She's asking directly,
What?
right?
Will an American
if the
agent
West
specifically
wins,
kill you?
Will the
Yeah.
West engage
Will they
in the same
prohibit my
types of
culture?
crimes against Ukraine that the Russians are doing?
Will they put us in mass graves? Will they rape my friends as Russians did? Will they do any of that? Tell me.
Well, I mean, if we go to war, they might. We do a lot of fucked
Will
up
they?
things when we
Will
go to war.
Well,
We're
last,
at
last
war
time,
with
one
Russia.
last time they did.
The
Yeah,
Joe Biden
when last
invasion of
fucking-
Crimea is soon.
Yeah, Joe Biden invasion. When it's
think-
happening? Tell me, please.
You think rape didn't occur in fucking Iraq and
Of course it did.
Afghanistan?
Now. 50, not 40, 50 years ago. Now, will they attack my country? Will you, America, Biden himself, will drive here on a fucking tank?
I'm not driving to
whatever the
fucking
fuck.
kill Ukrainians. I'm anti-war. What are you talking
No.
about?
Not you, your country. Will it do it? You're saying like I should prefer. Of course I fucking prefer America. Of course I fucking prefer European Union. When human rights, I prefer democracy. I prefer institutions that work. Do they work perfectly? Of
But
course
you are-
not.
you are-
They work
You
way
are,
better.
You're comparing to. You're setting up a false dichotomy where you're comparing being under Russian rule versus being controlled by Western imperialism. And what I would fight for, right, is that many of these areas have their own independence. I'm a fucking anarchist. I want to dissolve all these goddamn states. Right?
I
This
would
false
like to.
dichotomy
Would like
is you
to.
must
Would-
choose that
would-
Russia owns Ukraine or that America has its influence in Ukraine. And
Wait,
what I'm
wait,
saying
wait,
is we
you
should
didn't
fight for
answer anything
fucking
else.
peace.
Okay,
Yeah,
go
I
ahead.
didn't answer
I
because it's a
understand
false
what you mean.
dichotomy. I
No,
was
it's
pointing
not.
out the
You're
illogic
comparing
of
it.
your question.
You're trying to compare fucking owning American imperialism with Russian. If compare that to that, then of course fucking people prefer the West. because
I'm
you
not
seem
comparing.
to think
I'm not
that's worse.
comparing. I'm not comparing Russian imperialism owning Ukraine versus American imperialism having its deep ties and corruption within Ukraine. What I was saying is that even if you do win, right, that Western imperialism will certainly have its fucking way with you. I'm not
Yes,
saying
it will. Yes.
I'm not saying to compare that to the Russians taking over and owning Ukraine. I'm not advocating that we give
Okay.
Ukraine to Russia. I'm advocating for peace agreements
But you do
and for
understand
independence
that is,
for other
like,
areas.
You may not think you're advocating for that, but that is what you are
That's the
advocating.
result.
No,
for.
I'm not. Don't
That
fucking
will-
moderate
that
me and tell
will
me
be
that I'm
the result.
advocating something I'm not.
What we know what will happen,
You're not
right? If you throw
advocating.
something up, it will come down, right? And so when you advocate to stop funding the Ukrainian forces, military, for the U.S. and NATO in the West to stop sending material and giving training and aid to the Ukrainian troops, that the result of that will be, as non-smoker wisely pointed out, that Russia will win. And in that case, they will not be this independent state. All the things that Anna laid out will happen. But I want Dylan to
They are
go, and then we're
happening
going to wrap
now
this up.
in occupied
that's
areas.
not a-
Close portion.
No, the moderator called me out, right? Like that's not a realistic thing in any fashion. That like what occurs is that we just vote in total isolation to stop funding, right? Like that's just not a realistic position that any politician or anybody's putting forward. What they would say is to use the threat of stopping funding and make it clear that funding is going to stop and make
yeah.
and to,
No,
to
actually,
force people
about
to the
that, so-
negotiation table.
No, actually, about that, there was I looked this up too. There was a recent, in like February 2022, a resolution that was proposed by, I think it was Republicans in the
China.
House, the
yeah.
Ukraine fatigue resolution, which was proposed to basically stop funding. So yeah, it's being
People-
thought about.
Yeah, but
There-
people
there
put
is a
forward things that they know
non-zero
won't pass.
chance.
Like
There is a
People put
non-zero
forward-
chance, depending on the 2024 elections, that we just simply cut off funding.
Oh yeah, Trump's one of the few people who would actually just be like, "Fuck you, I don't care." Like we saw what happened in
There is a
Syria.
potential, yeah.
Like that was like just quit this overnight decision, just like with no consultation with anyone.
I'm so
Okay.
glad Biden's back in to put
I wanna
sanctions on
give,
Syria again.
Yeah, I want to give a space
These
to
are
Dylan,
sanctions.
but then we're going to wrap up the closed portion of this section. I know that it's late over there, and I want to give you a chance. If you need to bounce,
Yeah.
you got to bounce. I will be for those of you who are watching, right, and have big thoughts and they want to come on. You're welcome to come on the after show. Any of you here want to stay for the after show and answer questions are welcome to be there. But Dylan can respond to these things, and we're going to give each of you an outro, and we'll close it out. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to my channel. That would really help me out. If you're watching this on Twitch, I could use your subs, donos, bits. Thank you for the $20, Vivrook. I'm glad you like the panels. So yeah, I can't do this for free. Much like I'm not going to war or anything, right? But you can fund me. To much less than you fund Ukraine, but it'd still be helpful. But I want to give.
I have wick fatigue. I'm sorry.
And then we get keep on. Thank you for the gift subs. So Dylan, make your points, and then we're just gonna close it out with closing statements. Cool.
Yeah, sure. So, I guess we'll just finish on this point. So I don't know if it just comes from being disconnected, not being here, but it seemed that there was like a little shock. There was some laughter at the idea that Ukrainians would choose a relationship with the United States, knowing that the United States is not doing it out of 100% of the best intentions, or as a nation state when it comes to the government, at least, mostly from not the 100% most self-righteous, like, oh, I just want to help everybody intentions, and that they would side with them knowing that when they're just going to get fucked in the ass later. When you talk about the type of fucked in the ass that they're going to be going through, right? Like, oh, they're indebted to the American government, or oh, they took an IMF loan, right? And you compare that, when you sit down and you talk to Ukrainians, it's like, okay, compare that to what? Getting executed, getting raped, getting murdered. The largest mass grave in Europe since the Yugoslav genocide was uncovered in Izium, over 440 bodies. When Ukrainians see that, and then compare that to the worst outcomes that can come from joining the Western Bloc, the EU. I mean, even like the hardcore conservatives who are like, oh, I don't really like all this gay marriage stuff, but I mean, if we have to enact some protections for them in order to join the EU, we got to do what we got to do. It's not that surprising to me. I don't know if that just comes from being disconnected. I do think when it comes to Fabian, and I will ask you that, is Fabian, it seems from your perspective, you want them to fight for real liberty. You want them to fight for self-governments on the local level. But you're an ANCAP. ANCAPistan's never happening. It doesn't exist anywhere, and it's just not practical, and it's just not reality. At the end of the day, nation states are going to have to negotiate a real settlement to the war, and it's not going to be that type of local governance. So Ukrainians have to choose out of what is actually possible, which is trying their best to maybe win the war, and if they don't, trying to negotiate the best settlement or whatever they want. But ANCAPistan isn't a real option, so that's why they're not fighting for ANCAPistan.
Was that a closing, or am I just responding?
Yeah, was that your closing? Or
yeah, you can respond to that. It won't be fair.
Go for it.
No, I don't. Like, do I give my closing statement now, or do?
No,
oh, okay.
respond.
All right. Yeah. So
yeah, we'll do this.
I'll respond in the closing statement.
Yeah. Fair enough.
I'll just do my closing and said his closing, and I'll just respond quickly. Yeah. So what I think I've seen tonight is pretty much what I expected. Right, is that there is a narrative, and the narrative must be protected at all costs, so that the war can be protected at all costs. And the way that narrative and propaganda is constantly thrown out from the war apologists and propagandists that have been here tonight, is that we must focus on all of the bad that we see on the one side that is our enemy, and we must dismiss any other corruption or any other influences or nuance or explanation to how we got to these places or what things might look like in the future. And then once we do that, we can reframe it within our consequential analysis, and we can rub our little crystal ball and say that this is how it's going to play out. And we're going to have stability, and we're going to have democracy. And Ukraine, it might not be perfect under, the Western kind of neoliberalism, forces that it's under, but it'll be better and it'll be good. Except the problem is that this is all bullshit. What this is it's rhetoric. What they do is they take the best possible solution, which is they win. There's not a lot of deaths. We're not going to talk about how many additional deaths continuing war is going to cost, how many millions, thousands or millions, or who knows how many people are going to be slaughtered, how much, the economic devastation is going to destroy the world, economy and inflation and all of these other things. We'll just kind of set that off to the side and say, but the outcome at the end, it'll be good. And that's an assumed victory, right? And so that's why they have to go after non-smoker and say that, well, obviously, we can win this, we can win this, we can win this, we can win this. And and they don't want to talk about the fact that these experts are the people that constantly lie, and they know that they're lying, right? And that's one of the big things about the NATO expansion. Is it really the fact that a defensive pact has moved to one country that threatens the Russian Empire? Or is it the fact that it's proof over and over again that the West are nothing but fucking liars, and that they will go in and they will destabilize regions, and then once those regions are destabilized and war breaks out, they will come in like the fucking saviors they are to profit off it. That's the real fucking thing. And the fact of the matter is that when we talk about corruption in Ukraine, we no one wanted to address water blockage and human rights violations. No one wanted to address the fact that, Sich or, C14, S14, whatever you want to fucking call them, takes over the Rada, and fucking 128 fucking people within their parliament, their version of parliament, are fucking fleeing to fucking Russia. And, but the Supreme Court upheld it, and that's okay because, they totally weren't surrounded by fucking powers and done under arrest too. It is a corrupt fucking country, and Russia is an evil fucking empire. And the best thing that we can do is negotiate for peace. That is what is in the best interest for everyone, is to stop the fucking dying instead of trying to continue the fucking dying. And when I called it a war of vengeance, I didn't use those words. I said an ideology of vengeance. And the reason I called it an ideology of vengeance is because I demonstrated that it's not enough to simply get the borders back. It must be enough to crush Russia to such a degree that they can't fight back. And that's going to cost millions of lives.
Fight back.
And that kind of destruction and torment is going to have an untold cost. That's my closing statement.
Thank you. Non-smoker, go ahead.
Yeah, twitch.tv/non-smoker. Look, I remain thoroughly unconvinced, once more, that military support to Ukraine is going to do anything but result in more dead Ukrainians and dead Russians. I'm against that. I don't consider that to be a controversial viewpoint. I find it insane that you engage with people repeatedly. And I will say, as the more this debate has gone on, not this one in particular, but in general, this discussion has gone on, people have shifted to the view that, hey, there should be a resolution here soon. I think everybody is tired of war. I think everybody is tired of people dying. I think everybody wants a resolution, right? At this point, at least we're drifting towards that, away from that whole to the last Ukrainian viewpoint. I will say, and I have to, grant this to Anna, if I was in her position, I could totally understand that viewpoint. I just don't think it's a wise strategy. I don't think that millions of people dying is worth it. In terms of, wanting to be in the U.S. sphere because, Ukrainians are not being killed and this and that, I would say a big part of the reason why Ukrainians are being killed is because the U.S. is trying to pull Ukraine into its sphere. I think that at the end of the day, this is a conflict between the U.S. and Russia. Ukraine is a proxy. And a big part of the problem is the U.S. used to engage with the old Soviet Union as an equal power, similar to how they engage with China, right? Yeah, there may be provocations. Yeah, there may be tension or friction between the two. But ultimately, we respect them as a power, as an equal power, a nuclear power, one that we don't want to have, this aggressive relationship with. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, we, America, were the first to abandon that, one-to-one relationship where, hey, we look at them as an equal. We looked at Russia as basically like a lapdog. And that's how we look at the entire world. We look at the entire world as countries that are basically like either recalcitrant, weaklings or compliant weaklings compared to America. And we're seeing, Russia essentially rise up in defiance of that. Right. And I think the view of many Russians is that if they can't get their respect, dealing with us as an equal, they're going to force us to view them as an equal. And they're going to defy American, geopolitical hegemony. And that's what they're doing in Ukraine. It's not really about Ukraine, sadly. And a lot of Ukrainians are dying. A lot of Russian soldiers are dying. It's all, in my view, a thing that could have been avoided had a diplomatic resolution been reached a year ago when it should have been. Boris Johnson should have kept his fucking mouth shut. We should have not poured billions or millions of dollars, however much, into Ukraine trying to establish democracy. I don't think that's how fucking democracy works. It's not some artificial thing you can implant into a country. And, you know, I happen to think that this whole thing is tragic. I hope the war ends soon.
Well, thank you for being here. Omni, go ahead.
I mean, yeah, I mean, I just find like the whole like sort of liberal like view of all of these events just kind of hilariously just like nuanced and kind of childish. Like I mean, you've seen it from the opposing side. This whole debate, like they're saying, oh, yeah, Russia just decided to invade Ukraine one day because they're bad and they're evil and they want to revive the old Soviet Union, and they without like acknowledging at all that like. I don't know. Maybe Russia is actually kind of like responding to some shit happening to them and are near them, some kind of security concerns or something. Like, I don't know. Maybe that whole anti-Russia military alliance called NATO expanding consistently and constantly since the 1990s and towards them and closer to them. No, that can't have anything to fucking do with it. It must be because Russia bad. Like, it's like, I don't know. This is what a lack of materialism does to a motherfucker. Like, I don't know, dude. It's weird. Omni_slap1 on Twitch and Twitter.
Beautiful.
Okay, thank you.
Oh,
Anna, please close us out.
well, that was fun. Thank you. Just typical, common nonsense. Nothing new here. Yeah, well, anyhow, dudes, anyone who's watching this, please do support Ukraine in any way, shape, or form you can. This is a serious business. This is not a debate. People said they're tired and fatigued of the war. Nobody is more tired than us. So yeah, I appreciate any and all support. Please support Dylan. He's doing amazing work. Actually, amazing work. He gives voices to Ukrainians, which is what we wanted our entire existence. And we very much appreciate our favorite Dylan Bernsenko. Support his channel and give him money, And if you want, support me as well. My Twitter is Ukrainianana, and you can find my PayPal there. Help me actually provide people who actually fight in fascism and not sitting on their asses, debating shit and talking about ANCAP that, in things that never gonna happen. No offense, Scott. So please do help us. Actual work, real life work of fighting against an incredibly hard enemy that is a century-long enemy to this country and to its liberation. And unfortunately, there's no other way right now. Being against war is very brave. It is very brave. We all are against war, and we do hope it will end, but it depends on how it will end. Peace that will be achieved by ceding our territory, our people, most of all. Most importantly, people talk about land all the time. It's not land, it's people. It's people's homes. It's people's lives. So ceding those people, so to speak, if you can cede people to anyone, is not an option. We, Ukrainians, don't want that. We prefer to be fucking nuked with literal nuclear weapons than to give up to what Russians are doing to our people. It is 90% of people. You can laugh all you want, but it's just, I understand you're American.
I got you speak for every Ukrainian that they're willing to be nuked.
Majority of people. Of course, you know better. You know better what Ukrainians want than me, of course, right? But whatever, right, dude? You are just literally dumb. No point in talking with you at all. But anyhow,
Yeah,
just
send us the
point
nukes.
is, you don't know. No, we don't need nukes. We never wanted, never asked for it. Fuck those nukes. But
Well, no, I
apparently,
meant as
having
in
nukes is
being.
the
I
Okay,
meant
this
as
is
in
closing
being nuked.
statements. You gotta let it close out.
Can you please stop? Yeah. Manners, dude. Manners. You just need to have them. They're good. Like, for example, non-smoker is a very mannered person. Yeah. So yeah. By the way, so what I was saying before this all happened. Help us. Please help us if you can, if you're able to. This is very important to the stability and safety of this entire region, and to our future as people. If you don't care, then it's your right. Obviously, that's your money. That's for you to decide. But if you do care a little bit about important things, then do help us, please. And we appreciate every single person who helped us with literally any dollar, So goodbye, everyone. And thank you very much for listening. Yeah.
Well, thank you for being
And
here.
Week, thank you for asking me, by the way.
Of
Yeah,
course,
appreciate
Of
it.
course, you're welcome anytime.
Appreciate it.
Put those links in chat for all of our guests here. Gang, it's been a pleasure. we're gonna let them go if they need to go, but we are opening it up. So if you want to sound off in the after show, join the Discord, accept the rules, jump backstage, and we'll bring you on.
Hey, real quick,
But,
it seemed like a couple people, I don't know why, because I never brought up libertarianism or ANCAP, wanted to use that. I don't know if it was just because they were losing so bad. But if anybody wants to actually debate me on
Wait.
ANCAP stuff, my
we can
DMs
talk
are
about
open.
it. We could talk about it in the after show if
Fabian.
you'd like to stay.
No, I get it. You just want to try and get a jab in
You
because
talked about
lost. I
local
get it,
governance. You did talk about local. You said, oh, instead of siding with the West or the East, you should do local governance.
Yeah, that,
Like,
which is very realistic. Yeah, truly
Yeah,
realistic ideal.
that's-
Yeah.
I didn't bring up ANCAP.
Let me finish closing out, and then we'll keep
Just
going.
like I
Okay,
said,
so you told
my
me.
DMs are open.
Okay, fair enough. Gang, we got some great stuff coming up tomorrow. Tomorrow we have an open call-in show, so if you want to call in and we're just chit to chat. Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, we're gonna have some people on. We're gonna talk about religion, whether it's a force for good, or if it's something we should do away with, or if it's just neutral and we shouldn't touch it at all. It should be an interesting discussion. We have some great and interesting people on. A little more calmer, I suspect, but we'll see. You never know. So tune in for that. And with that, we'll close it out. We have a few people in the waiting room. If you guys need to go, please just head out. I know it's late, but we'll start bringing on the after show, folks.
I'm probably gonna leave soon.
I understand.
Yeah, I'm gonna dip. I have a
Oh,
burrito
hello.
flying at me. I'll see you guys later, all right?
Hey, see you later.
bye-bye.
Okay. Hello, friends.
I'll stay for a little bit. Why not?
Okay. Yeah, a little bit.
Just stay for a couple minutes so a couple people can say their piece.
Okay, what do we got? Loaderbox, welcome.
Hey.
Prussian, thank you for the money, by the way, in the gift sub, so welcome.
Oh, no problem.
Casimir and Baster, nice to see you. I guess we'll start with the guy who paid me money, Prussian. Thoughts on the panel? And what did you come on to share with us?
Oh, sorry. Oh, let me try and.
Okay, while he's doing that, then
Yeah,
we'll-
no, I just wanted to turn on my camera.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm listening,
So,
but I do have to pee.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
Basically, hi, howdy. Basically, it's very funny to see
I know the guy.
American people equating what it's like to be in the EU as opposed to in anywhere Russia has ever touched. Like right now, one journalist is taking down the entirety of Lithuanian government through investigative journalism, finding corruption, and the highest echelons of power due to political connections are being implicated. When has that ever happened anywhere that Russia has touched? Anywhere in the entire Russian sphere, anywhere Russia has any power, anything like that. That doesn't happen. Like, to be anti-war, to be anti-government, to be anti-expansionism of anything, that only happens if you're like at least hypocritically in the West. It doesn't happen anywhere else. So when Ukrainians are saying, yes, we know that there's problems with the West, but we would rather be West than be East, it's such an obvious choice if you have like any in-depth knowledge of the region itself. That's kind of the point I wanted to make.
Fabian just scoot out. Anyone else want to respond to that or anything?
Yeah, I'll respond to that.
Go for it, Casimir.
So he's absolutely right. Those types of freedoms to criticize the government only appear in countries that are currently relatively more democratic. But if you look at the detail, I think that the gloves that the Western powers wear are softer. The power that is used in the West is softer, but it's still fairly harsh. And if we're talking about Ukraine, opposition, various journalists from various sides of various oppositions were killed or threatened to be killed in Ukraine. And so it's not exactly the same as in the West. The same conditions apply in Ukraine. And I don't think that Western powers really
What do you mean about
with-
these journalists? Can you be more specific? What journalists have been killed or threatened to be killed? in Ukraine?
I don't want to be more specific unless we have an open debate about it, and then I'll
Ah.
give you all the names.
I see.
But I can tell you that if you go to reporting radicalism,
Kyiv
there's
is
a
just
website.
one.
No. We will go if you want to have a topic on this specifically on the threats
Just
of
for the
various
sake of the after show, you were saying that in Ukraine,
there is a website
that
called
there are
Reporting
that there are
Radicalism.
journalists who are being threatened with death. Can you give us a name?
I don't remember the names, but if you set up a debate about this, I will research, and I do remember that occurred. And one of the websites you should look at
Is this Peacemaker?
Is Reporting Radicalism. And on that website, connected with Freedom House, I believe, they have an investigation of various organizations that conduct street fighting operations that pressure people out into the streets. And it was noted as a problem before the invasion. After the invasion, we stopped talking about this. So it's the other thing is, in the West, we have other ways to pressure journalists. For example, we can keep one in prison, like Julian Assange, keep him in prison on completely farcical allegations.
I'm sorry, but like Julian Assange, like you brought that example, I mean, he's like, it's infamous that it's happening to him. In Russia, it's like,
yeah,
like
it's not
that.
just
Like
just
in
how it
Russia,
is.
we know about Navalny is in prison. It's also infamous.
Yeah, but
it's
how
also
many
like
are
that.
dead? How, like
Every
even that,
person
not
who says something
equivalent.
against the regime is prosecuted in Russia immediately.
How many
No,
Tatar
yeah,
activists?
it's
How many?
worse in Russia? And I'm saying that the gloves are softer in the West. But somebody like Julian Assange can sit in prison for years, and
Gloves
all
are
we can
softer,
do
but you're
is
still
say
making
what?
this comparison. Why exactly? So you're saying that Ukraine making strides to be more democratic, more institutions working, and be more like Western, is still fucking better than Russia.
No, it
It's quite
absolutely is.
simple. Yeah.
So
I'm not saying the West is perfect in any way, shape, or form, but comparatively to what the other side suggests, it is fucking perfect comparatively to that disaster.
So I'm back, right? The problem is that, like, if we compare the end goal and we don't look at any of the costs that it takes to get there, then yeah, sure, absolutely, it is better to be under the hegemonic, like, structure of, like, Western corporations and banks. Absolutely, everyone would prefer that outcome versus the outcome of being completely controlled by Russia. The problem is
we do.
what you're saying when you make that argument is that you're not calculating how many deaths it will take to get there.
I am.
How much damage will take
My
to get
people are
there.
dying, not yours.
Down to the last Ukrainian. Okay, cool. You're ready for all of them to be dead, right? And
I'm
for
pretty
the
sure it's
ideal.
not gonna happen
And
like that
so-
exactly, but
how many?
God, is there
and
any?
you're also not,
God,
and
sorry.
you're also not calculating the fact of whether or not it actually will occur. Like, there's no guarantee that you get that better outcome just
yeah,
because
but
you
there is a
fight for it.
guarantee what we're going to get if Russia gets us. That's a guarantee.
Vivian,
That's
how
a guarantee
could
for
we have
sure. Yeah.
prevented? How could we have prevented this war post 2014? And like, the Russians we're always gonna do this. There's no way
Yep.
to like appease them into not doing what they're doing. Like the whole thing of like you have to have territorial full integrity to join NATO. That's as an appeasement to say that Georgia and Ukraine won't join by Obama. He really pushed this point. Nobody ever talked about this point prior to that. Like Zelensky outwardly said, we're probably not going to join NATO. There's been all sorts of talks between Macron, various calls where all they were doing were promising all this shit to Russia, and yet they still invaded. We're acting like we can just like somehow, okay, we'll cede 5 regions of Ukraine now, and then it's gonna be peace forever. So those 5 regions stay in the Russian sphere, and that's like the
Who's
compromise.
acting like that? I'm just curious, who's acting like that?
You're acting like there's some solution to this war where like we can concede enough to Russia where they won't come back for more.
Well, why not just let Scott outline his like peaceful future? What happens? What land does Ukraine give up? What does it look like? I'm guessing they don't join NATO.
Well, so this is the problem, is that, like, I don't, unlike most people that are, working this consequentialist framework, pretend to predict the future and then make moral decisions based off of what the prediction of the future is, even if those decisions require, sacrificing lives. So I don't know that they're the perfect path to peace.
But
'cause I'm
all
not
societies
fucking-
do that.
I'm-
All societies have to do that constantly.
But you're also saying that
don't
you
have to
think
make a
that
moral
you think that
decision
the
off of
West
that. You
should.
can make a moral
but you
decision
think,
by not murdering, by stopping
but,
war.
yeah, so you think we should stop the war, but that if stopping the war necessarily means some kind of peace agreement and some
means?
kind of peaceful scenario, I want to know what that peaceful scenario looks like, because I know it doesn't involve Ukraine being in NATO. If you don't want to
I can
elaborate,
outline it.
no, if you don't want to elaborate, I can just say.
No, I can elaborate.
Yeah,
I can
go on.
elaborate.
Yeah.
So, about a year ago, Dylan Burns was on the Crucible, and I was a call-in from the audience, and I asked him a question, and I proposed a peaceful solution back then, and I said that my goal was for Donbass, for the people there, to have I named a certain amount of years, let's say 5 years moratorium. Nothing happens for 5 years. Luhansk, nothing happens for 5 years. And then those regions, after 5 years, they get to vote on where they want to be, and they're allowed to vote on being independent from both countries and being basically a demilitarized buffer zone between those countries. And
how can nothing happen in those countries? I'm so sorry. There's gonna be
I'll
some sort of
explain
control.
why. I'll explain
in them.
why. The reason
Who
why this
controls those
provision is
countries?
required is because everybody is criticizing the vote. I criticized the vote that occurred in Kiev in the Rada while it was occupied by C-14 in the right sector, and you're criticizing the vote in, rightfully so, and you're rightfully so criticizing the vote in Crimea when it's occupied by the military.
Sorry.
And other people are criticizing the referendums in Donetsk and Lugansk.
Wait.
In order to not have that criticism, you need to give a certain amount of pause for things to stabilize, to not have like military men there, to start demilitarization, and then have a vote. The vote cannot happen with military men in the streets.
Okay, your answer, that was an answer to my question. So, okay, first of all, I mean, that sounds a bit similar to what happened with the independence of South Ossetia and Abkhazia in the early 90s, and look what happened to them, right? But also, my question to what you just described, okay, that's why I want to know. It can be different this time. How does any of what you just said guarantee Ukraine's safety against future Russian aggression?
There is no, that's a false.
There's only one guarantee: kill every Russian. That's literally the only guarantee of safety from every, which is insane.
No, here's another one. Here's another one. Get that? No, wait. Here's another. Here's the. If you want the alternative, okay, sure.
So I can answer you. The only guarantee you have is when people gain independence and they gain control over their lives, which is what I'm advocating for, which is what you should be advocating for, and then they are armed, the cost of invading them becomes exponentially very high. The reason why Russia failed in Ukraine,
do you not think that Russia is willing to pay that price?
Is because Russian-speaking Ukrainians fought against Russia.
Casimir.
Russian-speaking Ukrainians en masse don't want to join with Russia, though.
Casimir.
Yeah, hello, can you hear?
Casimir.
I'm listening.
Russian-speaking Ukrainians, right here, dude, in the east.
That's what I said. You're not listening. I said Russian-speaking Ukrainians fought against Russia. Sorry if I misspoke.
No, my contention here is that your proposal, right, that they simply gain independence, gain self-control, and then get themselves armed. It's going to be a speed bump. Yeah, the cost will be high, but Russia has shown time and time again, it is willing to pay the cost. Right? It is willing to pay the short-term costs to get what they feel is a long-term imperial gain.
You guys submitted a lot of pieces of evidence up to the Russian invasion. So because you don't have those pieces, you can make that argument. But I don't want to take too much of your time. I know historical review will take a lot of time, but if you want, we can go to 2019, 2020, 2021, and we can see the points on escalation. And can you ask me, actually, here's a few questions I have for the rest of the panel. Because
why only that far? Why not go back to 2003, like Dylan was saying, right? Why not go back to 2008,
I'll explain, because
right?
You need to answer this question. When did the Russian military start accumulating on the borders of Ukraine, and when do they start threatening this aggression?
When they are starting to accumulate on the borders is way, way beyond when they have started to plan and build up material, build up forces to actually carry out this plan, right? Like, so this build up on the borders is kind of a last step rather than a first step, right? You understand that?
They were also conscripting people in Crimea from like 2014 onwards, but
which is illegal under international law.
But the reason why you don't want to talk about 2019 is you don't want to talk about the steps that Ukraine made, that Zelensky made, that have escalated from the perspective of Russia and made that cost more acceptable. Even now they're learning that they're paying way too high for it. But things like touching their energy corporations that they didn't directly control, but they influenced in Ukraine. And when those started getting touched, when their allies in Ukraine started getting robbed of their corporations and of their TV channels, then Russia realized that, hey, we're going to lose all channels of influence. And it's when that person was put in prison and when his corporation got taken over then the Russian military appeared on the border as an escalation of that escalation.
And did Zelensky start doing that before or after Putin had Russian personnel in the east of Ukraine?
You include the east of Ukraine in Crimea?
Yeah.
After. No, in eastern Ukraine, in the Donbass.
So again,
Little
the
green men,
Donbass and Luhansk had Russian presence, but also Ukrainians in 2014 were sending units to Donetsk and Luhansk. And what was happening is that there were
they sent units after
Russia.
the separatists were occupying government buildings and shutting down TV stations. You don't know. Like you're back to front.
But this is what the Ukrainians in Kiev were doing to government agencies and government buildings, and there was a government building in Odessa that was burned down with many pro-Russians
What
inside
mandate
of it.
does Russia have?
Wait, wait, stop. That building that got burned down was because there's a clash on both sides and Molotovs were being thrown on both sides, and people on both sides tried to fucking stop the building from burning down. Like you're just okay. Whatever.
When this happens, what you need to do is you need to take a break and not have a referendum that day, but have a referendum a bit after. Just like I don't believe that with people armed in the street and half of your a fourth of your government out in escaping the country, you can have an actual referendum on who is going to be the president. You can't do that. In a similar manner, if you look.
Okay, I want to give space.
You also should look at. Nobody here on the other side of the panel has answered Scott's question about the water canal. You didn't even recognize that point.
No, it's bad. They shouldn't have done that.
No, don't do that. You're the moderator. You have Dylan Burns here, and you have this lady.
Yeah, but you are keep talking, and I'm
to
trying to
condemn
get
it.
people in, but you keep talking. So I can't get them in because you say, well, you have all these people, no one's answering. Maybe if you shut the fuck up, I could get people to answer. Maybe that would happen. Maybe if you took a little time and shut the fuck up, and if you don't do it willingly, I'm gonna make you do it, right? But I want people to give and address your concerns and answer your questions, but you got to give them space to do so. And with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Dylan, then Anna, in that order.
I've said this before and I'll say it again. I don't like the cutting off of the water. Whether or not they did, the Ukrainian government obviously for good reason didn't want to help the Russians legislate occupied territory. I believe, what, do you think they should have cut off the water? Why were you shaking your head at that?
Because it's not enough to do this condemnation. It's not enough.
Oh, okay, one second. I'll get some water bottles and I'll go to Crimea and I'll hand it out.
If you were to do that, you would defeat my argument right now. But you didn't do that. You didn't even think about it. You don't care about the humanitarian crisis in.
Can you just can you tell me what Russia?
The Tatars, unless they're your.
What? Wait. Okay, so I don't really care because I didn't bring water to the people of Crimea.
And you didn't bring up this point in the debate at all. You're not ready for it. You just
because it wasn't my point. I brought it up before. You mean okay? What more can I do besides a condemnation? Do I have to start a charity?
Yeah. What you should do is you should mention it as one of the reasons why Russia could potentially plan an attack, because that's one of the war goals.
Someone else mentioned it, and I've mentioned it before. I've talked about it before.
Here's a question.
Because I didn't talk about it on this specific panel.
Question. If this was the only war goal, would you consider the war justified?
If this was the only war goal of the Russians, no, I would not consider the war justified. I don't think they needed to march on Kiev in order to restore water to Crimea. They didn't need to march on Kharkiv. They didn't march on any of these places to restore water to Crimea. Honestly, you know what they could have done? If they wanted to restore water to Crimea, they could have also left.
Just so you know, as well, before Ukraine cut off that water, Russia was already conscripting residents in Crimea. They were already moving military equipment into the region, and they were killing Tatars. They were also they blocked traffic in the Black Sea. So I don't know if you should. Maybe I don't know how I feel about doing it myself, but like, I don't know if you're also obligated to keep supplying water to a country that's militarizing on your border.
Yes, you do.
So
you do that in Hamas in Gaza all the time.
Yeah.
Israel does it in Hamas. They have to supply water because the innocent civilians...
Have Palestinians occupied Gaza? Is Gaza occupied by the Palestinians right now? Is that a military occupation by Gaza?
By the military of Hamas. Hamas didn't have an election.
It's not. Wait, it's not occupied in the same way that Crimea is.
Hamas is a terrorist organization, and yet Israel supplies water because there is innocent civilians in Gaza, and there are innocent civilians in Crimea that did not perform any crimes, that are there against their will,
and they can't leave their homes and their families. They can't abandon their property. So yes, you supply water to them, especially since you don't need to do anything. You just need to keep the canal unblocked. If you block this natural canal that was built during the Soviet Union, you're performing aggression against peaceful civilians. It doesn't matter that some of them militarized. It's not an excuse.
Which military which military annexed Gaza?
Hamas, when they didn't have an election.
Hamas didn't annex Gaza. That's not annexation.
They were supposed to have an election every 4 to 5 years. And
so
a dictatorship is not an invasion.
A dictation is not an invasion.
This
is silly.
Military annexation.
Sure.
Also, if Ukraine blocks water to...
Okay, my God. All of you, please. I want to give space to Anna, then Fabian. Go ahead.
No.
Okay, no, fair enough.
Loner Brooks did it and Dylan did the fabulous job.
Noted. Okay. Oh, I see you. What was your name? Baster? Let's give you a chance, Baster.
Oh,
Go ahead,
thanks,
Baster.
Bud.
You haven't
Thanks,
spoken.
Wick, and thanks for organizing this. So yeah, to me it kind of blows my mind that any type of water supply issues can be a justification. Like, we're talking about the almighty Russian Empire, right? They should be able to build. They built the biggest bridge in the Black Sea. They should be able to build like a water supply. Why are you shaking your head, man? Okay, actually, don't answer that because you're gonna take an age. They could force labor to build a fucking bridge to Crimea, but they couldn't provide water. Like, that's insane to me.
Well, they did provide water. That's the point. Yeah, they were fine.
That to justify an attack on a sovereign country that causes more suffering. So I just don't understand these weird points where you're saying, oh, you don't want to be part of, you don't want to be part of Russia. Well, then fuck you, you're gonna get bombed, and then you don't want to provide us with water. Well, fuck you, you're gonna get bombed. Like, this is absolute insanity in my mind. Like, there is nothing that can justify this activity and action. Whatever NATO encroachment. No, sorry, just let me finish. Sorry about that. Whatever NATO encroachment you're talking about. Is there a scenario in which NATO attacks Russia? There isn't any such scenario. That's World War III. That's never going to happen. So any kind of security concern bullshit that Putin is putting out there isn't legitimate security concern. It's a veiled excuse to say, okay, I can fuck with these Eastern European countries. I'm gonna mess with their internal politics, and you can't do anything to stop me because I have nukes and they can't join NATO.
Explosion tells otherwise.
You don't have any proof on that. You don't have anything for that.
So I'll respond, right? And so what is occurring here is it's again, it's a point I had to reiterate throughout the entire debate. We're seeing it again, which is that any form of attempting to understand the situation and understand the nuances of why this war occurred, right? Other than just stating Putin is evil. Putin might get assassinated by the oligarchs if he's not super evil. Putin, Russia 2.0, USSR 2.0. And what no one here that I've heard thus far has stated that Russia is justified. I think everyone has completely and fully condemned Russia's actions for invading. And yet what we are saying is that it is not so simple to state that it is just an evil empire of evil Russians, Russia, that we need to just fight against the evil, because it is battling of the war drums of the same tactics that we used throughout the Cold War and the same tactics that we've been using ever since. Russia is one of our favorite scapegoats so that we do not deal with our internal issues. We do not deal with so many other things. And so that we can justify actions that are also wrong, right? And we can justify those things by creating a bigger evil. And yes, Russia is evil. Russia exists, and Russia invading is fucking horrible. And yet it is important to recognize blocking off water. It's important to recognize the way that shock therapy was done not in all the way that it was done in Poland, but was done in a completely corrupt and fucked up way. And by understanding all of those facets that lead into this, then you can begin to have a whole picture of the scenario and the motivations behind them.
Or Fabian, right? We do understand this. We have weighed this. We have measured this. We said no one's perfect here. No one's a good guy in this. But given all the facts that we understand at our disposal, Russia is insanely in the wrong and needs to be opposed. They will not stop unless they are stopped. And the most effective and efficient way to do that is by giving the Ukrainians what they need with military might, right? I think we should perhaps go even further, right? I support a little more direct action in Ukraine from the Americans, at least, right? But
Yeah,
that's
so
just
I
me,
mean-
and I understand why.
So-
Wait, what does that mean? Wait, what does that mean?
So-
Sending our
That
troops?
means
So-
sending,
I
yes,
mean, like,
having boots on the fucking ground. I will
Are
say.
you,
that.
are you signing
He
up?
volunteers
So-
himself. He wants to go.
So
I've
again,
signed
you
up
know,
for the
it
military
is.
before. Like, it's not like I haven't done this, right? It's not like I didn't serve my country, right? So again, I know what's
Hey,
the stake
Wick,
here.
you wouldn't want to be a war tourist, would you?
Okay. Okay.
Good
Not,
deal,
it
you
ain't
know?
tourist when you're going to blow
you
shit
know,
up, okay?
This is.
No,
I ain't
Dylan is a
taking
this
good
is-
reason for
this
going.
is-
Yeah, let's start a
This
full-on
is-
war with a nuclear
it
power.
is-
Let's fucking go.
Right. It's really weird because, you know, there is this. You can almost taste the propagandized, indoctrinated mind when they respond with things like this. As
Fabian, we can talk about all the
Because-
3 fucking like 4 lies that you told throughout the debate if you want, but every time you said the propaganda thing, like you were wrong about fucking NATO promising not to expand eastward. You were wrong about what Boris
I
Johnson
wasn't.
said and tanking negotiations. Like,
No, I
you want to
wasn't.
talk about the quote? Where does he say, what's he referring to when he says 1 inch eastward?
He's
Tell me.
talking about a conversation that he had with Gorbachev. And
Yeah,
NATO
and what
expansion
did
and the
and
reunification of
what? No,
Germany.
wait. What did Gorbachev say about those talks regarding NATO?
But I don't have the direct quote that Gorbachev has. at
Gorbachev
some
said
other time about those
Gorbachev said
talks.
that those talks had nothing to do with expanding NATO beyond East Germany. It was about those talks again because every country east of Germany, when those talks were happening, were still in the Warsaw Pact. There was nowhere for NATO to go. Why would you say we won't expand NATO to countries that are in the Warsaw Pact? That doesn't even make any sense. They were talking about moving military equipment into East Germany, which they never did. There was nothing.
if
there was no
that's- if
promise
that's the
anywhere
case-
not to
if that's
expand
the
NATO
case,
to Eastern
why
Europe.
is it- if that's the case, then why is it that Germany there were records in the UK that showed that Germany stated that Poland couldn't be a NATO ally because Gorbachev and the Russians were promised that there wouldn't be eastward expansion of NATO?
I mean, they were wrong. Like, yes, some politicians were
Oh,
wrong.
okay. All right,
Gorbachev
got it,
himself. I can
Roger,
show you.
Roger.
Fabian, just while you're shaking grit, I can give you the quote of Gorbachev saying this had nothing to do with NATO expanding east of Germany. I can show you that if you want.
Or
Okay,
like,
so
are you implying that Gorbachev
You know-
was negotiating the complete collapse of the Soviet Union at that time?
Well, yeah, that's the thing because this was before anyone knew the Soviet Union was going to collapse. Yeah. Why the fuck would you say
feel
we're
like-
not going
I
to
feel
expand
like
NATO into an
February
empire that we have no
19
control
I
in?
feel
Well,
like
We're
in
falling
February of
apart.
1990, they
Please
had a
don't
pretty good
expand
idea that
into
the
our
Soviet
now
Union was
collapsing
losing.
empire. Is that what Gorbachev was doing?
In
You know-
February
you know
of
what would
1990,
really-
you're arguing that that they thought that Russia and the Warsaw Pact was going to be this forever thing. Like, no, they already knew that they were fucking losing. They already knew that they were fucking crumbling.
Well,
That's why those
maybe
negotiations are taking place
Gorbachev,
anyways.
if he wanted to, should have got a deal that said we won't expand NATO beyond East Germany, but that was never in the deal. The deal was specifically, you look at the context, the entire conversation, it's all to do with moving military into East Germany. That's it.
Also, why didn't they
There's
get?
a-
Why didn't they?
That's why
there's a
even
question-
fucking
there's a question
even
about-
Yeltsin appeals to the spirit of the deal. Like, there's nothing written saying that NATO won't
Yeah,
expand
but
into
nothing is- nothing is
Latvia,
outside
Lithuania,
the
Poland.
box.
Hmm.
Was there a deal where heavy artillery is to be used against Donetsk and Luhansk, where women and children are going to be shelled in 2014? Is there any deal for that? And
Oh,
why
who
do
brought
you
the
not support
artillery
the
in there?
By
independence?
who?
Wait,
The
They were
independence
brought the
shot.
artillery in
Tell
there?
me,
Who brought
my
the
man.
tanks?
away from
Actually,
Ukraine and Russia?
actually, yes, I negotiated that deal.
Are you talking about
Oh, you
Minsk? It's hard to
Again,
tell which
there's lots
fucking
of yellows,
propaganda
but I
line.
don't get the question out.
No, I'm
You're-
sorry. I was only
you're-
doing one of Fabian's disinformation points. We can do the Boris one as well. What did
Sure,
Boris
sure.
say in that
But
talk
let's
about
do first,
tanking
let's
negotiations?
First do your support for the shelling of women and children in Donetsk and Luhansk.
So
Hey,
your,
hey, hey, dude,
your
I'm literally
place.
living here.
Anna,
Well,
go
that's
ahead.
still good.
Take it if you want.
It's just the same shit propaganda points, dude. Nobody bombed people in Lugansk and Donetsk until Russians invaded and used separatist groups there, their militia they sponsored and they equipped. By the way, Russian citizens ruled that mob that was there, you know, separatists, so to speak, separatists. Until then, nobody was hurting anyone in Donbass. In fact, nobody suffered there, you know. So yeah, they started the war, and as a result of this war, some civilians indeed die. I, for example, hosted refugees from Donbass in my own personal home for a year. They lived in my apartment, and they escaped from there for a reason that Russians literally shelled their fucking home. And you know, it's the only reason any of that happened is Russian invasion. So yeah, there was no troops of Ukrainian far right, whatever the fuck you want to say, that shelled people in Donbass before Russians invaded it. So yeah, as a result
But
of
it's
Russian
fine to shell
invasion,
them
civilians
afterwards
died.
and hit civilians. It's fine to use heavy artillery against civilian populations from the Ukrainian side, and it's not fine when Russia does it. I don't understand this. Both of them are evil.
Where-
Just say that they're evil.
where?
Because when
Nobody
someone
says
starts a
it's
step, when
fine.
someone starts a separatist war and you have foreign soldiers in the army, yeah, some civilians are going to die. What are you talking about?
Some civilians are
I'm
gonna
like,
die.
how many-
Without
you can look at
civilians.
the-
You're not targeting military units. You're targeting residents in their homes.
No, they
which is the
didn't
thing
target
that is supposed to be
residents.
condemned. It's evil, and all you have to do, the only thing you have
Is
to say
Mariupol
is
evil?
just
How
say
about my
that
fucking
you
Kharkiv?
support.
How about it?
You
Is
have
it
a very
evil?
simple position. Liz, let me ask you a simple question. Do you support people having independence if they vote for it, if the vote is conducted properly?
Did they
Do
vote?
you support? They have not. I'm asking you in principle. In principle, would you
Yeah,
promote
they will not vote for
direct
If they have a
Russians.
vote,
from
sure.
Ukraine
Yeah.
Yeah,
voting
if
to
they can
separate
have a
from the
vote without
country?
Russians there, yeah, sure.
No, please
You
let
know,
me finish
why
the
not?
question and answer it
Sorry.
clearly so that everybody can hear. Do you support, after there's no troops on the ground, as a principle that these are regions in Ukraine that should have a vote to have either complete independence or autonomy within a federation? Do you support that?
Yeah, but without
Okay,
troops
good.
there,
That's
without
good to
Russians
hear.
there. Yeah,
I mean,
why not?
it
They won't vote
depends
for
on the
Russians.
context.
Just so you know,
Yeah.
just so you know, like
Yeah.
just to get past like another propaganda, but Russia doesn't give a fuck about these places having free elections. That's why they had to. That's why they had to put troops in there. Like they know
That's
that their entire history of Ukraine
we all agree.
is even pro Russian Ukrainians. Even Russian Ukrainians like who want to lean towards Russia, like in terms of economic deals and stuff like that. Even though there's not that
never
many of them
voted.
anymore, like they always oppose Russia exerting its will too far over Ukraine. The Tuzla Island crisis in 2003, Russia tried to, it's like a tiny little fucking spit of land underneath the Kerch
And
Bridge
they
that
were
Russia tried to build a
complicit,
dam in. And both West and Eastern Ukrainians rose up against it in 2003 because that's like Russian overreach that they don't like, even if it's just over building a dam on an island without authorization. So.
And those people were betrayed by the government in Kiev, who does not support what this lady is saying. It does not support what you are saying, because they're perfectly fine with declining.
Well,
the
if I have
independence
them on my
desire of
channel,
those
then you
people.
can
This
question
is-
them.
When did
This is
Kiev?
Dylan, go ahead. Dylan, I
Sorry,
wanna listen to
that's
Dylan. Dylan.
yeah.
So the first thing I would say is, I told you I responded to your proposal. This proposal back in the day when you first said it. First of my response was, well, of course we're going to also have to have displaced people vote. If there's going to be a vote in the Donbass, we need to have all the people who have been displaced to America, to Canada, to the rest of Europe, to all these other locations, because their homes they were forced out of their homes in many
And they
instances.
love Russia, right? Those people
Most in
forced
my
out of their
experience, no.
houses. Sorry, Dylan.
But
Apologies.
that's the first thing. But second thing, there's also a question of like practicality. When we say the Kiev government will reject a free independent vote in the Donbass, for that to occur, we would need to have no Russian soldiers there, because if there's Russian soldiers there can be voter intimidation. There would have to be a lot of international monitors that are respected, that are not from like wackadoodle like parties that are going to do whatever they're told. They're going to have to be respected international monitors. There's going to probably have to be UN peacekeepers to monitor the process, make sure everything's going on. All of this is going to happen, and those conditions cannot be created on the ground right now. I see no path for those conditions to be created on the ground right now. If those conditions could be created, and we could have this magical scenario where we sit down with every single person, we have this vote, and we get to that solution, that'd be great. But we can't, and so we have to figure out how we maneuver outside of that principle, what we would like, what would be the perfect scenario, because we don't live in a perfect world.
How do we
How do we-
move
Magical.
towards?
You just
let
outlined.
me. Yeah. How do we move towards being able to bring the Russians to the table and seek peace? Right. Like obviously, I would assume you don't agree with what the Chinese are doing, right? Because their position, their 12-point plan is much closer to what Russia wants. So how do we, as the West, right, actually bring them to the table and stop the killing? How do we do that? Because I don't think it's sending shadow missiles and training pilots and F-16s and promising a fucking never-ending sieve of money.
Well, put it this way. So if let's say these referendums happen, one of them is going to have to happen in Donetsk, right? And if that happens in Donetsk, that means they're going to have to, like, I'd imagine the Russians that have been moving into Mariupol as part of Russia, like trying to rebrand the entire city, they'd probably have to leave because they can't vote for, like, they're moved in there as a result of occupation.
Right. So how do we get towards that goal?
So
no, the problem is what I just said.
Because that's my goal. How do we
What
get
I-
towards that goal?
What I
The
just
fir-
said, having referendums in all these territories when the displaced people can return, when the people who came in since the occupation have to either stand down or leave.
The
I'm
answer-
sorry, Russia never concedes to
The
that.
answer is
That's
simple.
not what they want.
Fabian, Scott, the answer is simple, right?
Mhm.
We punish Russia until they are forced to come to the negotiation table. We make them. We force
So
them.
wait,
We use coercive force.
we're not
We
in
force
any
them
way, shape,
to
or
this
form.
table.
But the thing
And we
is
do
that
this
like
through missiles, military might, projection of force, men and
Murder.
material.
Yeah, we get it.
Right?
Killing.
But
Kill,
what
kill,
Russia
kill,
is
kill, kill,
currently
kill.
saying,
But we're not
Do you
signaling
want to just ask them
even.
nicely? Please,
We're not
Russians,
signaling.
Please, would
No.
you not think of the children?
We're
Think
not
of peace.
signaling.
Please
Listen,
leave.
we're not signaling in even the slightest capacity that we're willing to engage in good faith negotiations. Like you could do one
they?
thing
The
that
Russians?
would change. You could do
Wait.
one thing. I'm not asking. I've already stated Russia's fucking evil. I'm not fucking
No,
pro-Russia
no. You
here.
said we are
Like,
not doing good
right,
faith.
yeah,
Americans, I
because we're
presume.
talking
Ukrainians
about
are not
Western
nothing. Are nobody.
intervention,
Yeah.
Western power. This is about Western money. This is about what the
Yeah,
West
everything
should
is
do.
about America
right?
to you. You're American, you know.
No,
I
that's
know.
literally what
But
the
wait,
debate
what-
topic has
what
been
can the
about.
West
I'm not
do?
living in Russia
So-
talking about what Russia should do. Now listen, like we very easily could say, hey, look, we're giving you money, we're giving you support, we're giving you training, we're doing everything we can, but like, hey, cut the shit. We know that you drone bombed in Moscow. And we know that when you said, quote, of course, we're pleased to watch and
Cut the
predict
shit?
an increase
Wow,
in the number
shit,
of
yeah.
attacks. But of course, we have
Oh, I
nothing
see, I see.
directly to do with this. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, right? We could do
Nah,
a
I
simple
mean,
condemnation
you know.
about certain actions, right? That shows that, like, hey, we are really
Yes,
trying
of
to
course.
be an
Scott,
arbiter
there
in this situation.
Talk about Russian drones in Moscow, but not Mariupol, not Gostomel, not Irpin, not entirely ruined. I don't know, like
This is
probably
the
20%
insanity of
my
your
country.
position. This is the insanity of your position. I say we
Insanity
should
of
condemn
my
one thing,
position.
and you go, but what
Yeah,
aboutism?
of
But
course.
what aboutism? Russia's evil. Russia's evil.
You
Fight
are doing
Russia.
the fucking
Kill the Russians.
whataboutism. You're talking about America and the West non-stop.
No, I'm
and
talking
this
about
is the
how
main
the
culprit,
fuck do we get
which
to
it
a
isn't.
peace deal? We don't get to a peace deal by picking a side and saying we will do everything we can to support that side and
What
defeating the
about
other
them
side.
keen,
That
actually?
doesn't bring
You
towards peace.
okay, Scott, wait, can I
What
tell you why your
peace?
plan isn't
Suggest me
going to
fucking
work?
plan.
Your
What
plan
peace?
is never going
What
to
can
work.
I negotiate with Russia? Please tell
So-
me.
Well,
Russia
that's the
sits
problem.
there
The problem is that there is
and
no
saying,
peace negotiation that Russia would
Yeah,
that would guarantee any
exactly.
safety for Ukraine. Also,
Exactly.
second, just a question to the anti-war coalition, I guess. Do you guys think Ukrainians are retarded?
Yeah, they do.
I just think you're
I
retarded, not
answered it.
Ukrainians.
Well, no,
Well,
I'm just okay. So I'm
When
just
did you
saying because
stop beating
around
your
the
wife?
around the same time that Boris supposedly
I don't
tanked
think
those
I'm retarded.
negotiations
Come on,
and
don't
overrode the
insult me.
will, I'm asking you if you think Ukrainians are
No,
because
I don't
Are
think
you
I'm
Ukrainian?
retarded.
That's
So-
not what
Are
he
you
said.
Ukrainian?
No, it doesn't
okay, so
matter.
you're
I don't-
Ukrainian.
You
Okay,
don't know
so I'm just
who I am, but you don't have to insult me. This is a civil panel. I haven't
Wait,
insulted
are you Ukrainian? Are you
It
Ukrainian?
doesn't matter. It doesn't
I'm not
matter.
insulting you. I'm asking you if you think
Hey,
Ukrainians
you-
are.
Wait,
That's
okay.
an insulting question.
Okay.
Obviously,
Okay,
I
I'm just gonna carry on with. The, okay,
Wait,
I'll
wait,
just-
wait, wait, wait,
all right,
wait,
I'll
wait,
ask.
Kashmir,
I'll ask the
Kashmir.
question in a more civil way.
I don't believe that people as a group can be identified this way. So obviously, I would be against it. What are you, crazy?
Okay, so
Stop.
so the point I'm making, I didn't expect the reaction. Okay, so the question I'm asking is, at the same time that you were saying Boris single-handedly tanked negotiations, at the same
didn't
time
say
that
that.
happened, more than 80% of Ukrainians were against any negotiation of like land for peace, and like more than 60% of them wanted to carry on to resist Russian aggression until everything, including Crimea, was back. So that's what they want, and I have a feeling that they're going to do that with or without our help, because they know what happens. They know what happens if they don't resist, and that they get taken over by Russia, and that's the worst case scenario.
So what you're saying is first you reframe my position to Boris single-handedly tank, which is not something
You
that I
said
said.
he
I just said
tanked
that
the
he tanked.
negotiations, which he didn't
Yes,
do.
he
I mean,
did.
you can try. You can show me any. You can where in the transcript did you say that?
I mean, this was where in the transcript. Do you have the transcripts of everything
can
that
we-
Boris
can we
Johnson
drop
ever
the
said in
Boris
these
part?
meetings?
Wait.
Yeah,
Can we
I've
drop
got
the
it from.
Boris
There's,
straw man
it's up
and
on
go to
Downing Street's
Naftali
website in
Bennett
9th of April.
and the
Yeah,
actual
this is
negotiations. Can
this
we
is the
drop
9th of
Boris?
April. This is the 9th of April talk between
we
Boris and
don't need to
Zelensky.
talk
You know.
about Boris. Boris is a.
I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to my friend Fabian at the Hobbit
Yes,
Hole.
but there's an article where
I'm
Prime
trying to
Minister
talk to him.
Naftali Bennett-
I'm sorry.
That's
shut up.
the
Naftali
good thing
Bennett
about him,
is
you know, the
one that's-
Hobbit
that
thing.
confirmed it. So we can talk about Naftali Bennett and then we have our evidence. We
Again.
don't have to go into that segue.
We have a direct participant in the negotiation that said both sides were ready, and the West said no. And he said that he believes that the West was right in doing so at the time. That's what Naftali Bennett said. But he said the West did stop the negotiations. When did it happen? I don't know. I can
We didn't
read
want
the
the
article right
negotiations.
now. It's just a fact
Our-
of what Naftali
Dude,
Bennett is
So
saying.
it's just like with the way you guys talk as if as if Ukrainian people don't exist. You can look at the polling
Yeah,
numbers.
we don't,
Ukrainian
yeah.
people don't want to negotiate with Russia.
To it better. But you don't have to go over the
They don't care
policy.
about what we want.
Listen,
That's pretty
here's
clear, yeah.
how it works in the West. If all the people are voting against something, and we have, our media channels. If the media channels spin a story for 2 weeks straight, public opinion tends to shift. And if when the media channels are saying we're going to win this war, people support the war. When the media channels are saying we should sign a peace deal, in a few weeks of that type of messaging, then the opinion polling starts changing. That's
Yeah,
why
so they're retarded. Yeah, I know.
Democrats,
It's
you as a
fine.
Democrat support politicians
They're
that get elected,
super
and then the politicians
susceptible
decide for you
propaganda.
whether you like it or
Yeah,
not.
very silly people we are for sure. Yeah,
I
don't
ask
know
a
what's
que-
good
can
for
I-
us.
No, it's
Can I
not
just
that.
ask a
Americans don't
question?
know.
First,
You know?
before you
Can I-
ask anything, I want to get some
Yeah.
more people in here, right? I want to
ahead.
give some space to some other people, right? So I want to give space to two people who haven't really talked much, Prussian and Baster, and they get to go first. So Prussian and then Baster, go ahead.
Sure. So we're going on about negotiating with Russia. What peace looks like. Since 2014, for about 8 years, EU especially, many nations to great extent, the West especially of the Iron Curtain, they've been negotiating and dealing and investing billions into Russia, and the whole idea was is we keep this connection through peaceful, friendly means, then we're going to have stability because Russia is a logically active nation that we can work with in good faith. And if we just work with them and mutually benefit, then there won't be any need for war. And they still invade. So how can we, if we're logically thinking reasonable individuals, especially those in charge, right? Let's say they are. How can they
Sorry.
now, how can they go to Russia with any sort of deal that doesn't come from Russia being in a position of weakness and hope that they will honor that deal? Russia has broke any faith they had. The problem with making any sort of peace with Russia that doesn't come from military might, which is why through pain and through unpopularity, all these other independent nations chose this path, because nobody that has the full information in front of them believes there's any good faith negotiation to be had. I would love. My city is dying because we were 60% beholden to trade with Russia. Thankfully, some of it is coming back and we're working with it. But I would love for the trade routes to open, to everything to be sorted, for the war to end. But I don't believe the war will end through some sort of good faith deal we make with Putin because of his actions. I have nothing else to judge Putin on except for his actions. And his actions shown time and time again that he does not have good faith.
And his words, let's be clear.
Yes.
Yeah,
but
you can also
how
judge
do
him on
you
his
do it?
words, and let's be clear. Putin has made no secret of his intentions towards Ukraine or the larger bloc, the blocks in that region. He has been very clear, both in word and in deed, that he wants to reunite, right, and have some sort of strong Russian kind of pan-Russia. I don't know the technical term for it.
Yeah, Russian world, yeah.
Yeah, this Russian world
Union
type
state, the
deal.
one
He's
they
been
were
very
built-
clear.
building with those
So
that-
to answer this,
Briefly, then we got to go to Baster. Yeah.
well, it seemed like his entire thing was a question, so I was gonna.
Yeah,
I'll answer
it
the
seemed
question.
directed
Go to
at me.
Baster. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So to answer this, I mean, it seems to summarize your argument is that Russia is about as bad faith an actor as can be, and so therefore you don't see any possibility of being able to negotiate with them until they are militarily backed into such a corner that they're forced to negotiate. And that is.
If I could summarize,
am I incorrect in that?
My
I mean,
point.
that's my
is that,
point. Yeah.
my point is that unless Russia is in a position where they have to accept certain demands from us, we can't negotiate with them otherwise. That's
Yeah. It seems like you just Yeah, it seems like we're paraphrasing my paraphrase. Like, yeah. But what I would say in that regard is that might be true. That absolutely might be the reality. Nobody really knows, right? Like that's our best guess given the best available evidence. That because they're in there's a belief that he's in a position and that the Russians are in a position, right, where they have to project this strength, and so they might fight to the last, tooth and nail. Regardless of whatever negotiations come, unless the deal is so favorable to them that they can make it a Pyrrhic victory. You might be right in that regard, and that's a personal, but that's a descriptive understanding of what the reality might be. That doesn't change what it is that we should be fighting for and what it is that we should signal, right? Just because you may believe that the reality is that Russia, it must be forced back in some capacity, doesn't mean that we give up on the idea of negotiation. Doesn't mean that we tell lies to people in order to drum up support for the war, that we're fighting for democracy. It doesn't mean that we have to propagandize and gaslight and move in such a way that we don't actually fight for peace, that we don't condemn things that are bad that should be condemned.
Could I actually respond to his point? Oh, sorry, Dylan.
I'd love to respond. So there's a few things that have been talked about a while ago, but I want to bring back up. The bombing of the Donbass children. The reason why a lot of Ukrainians react to that and they roll their eyes and they're like, and it's even become in some areas like a meme, like, oh, Donetsk children, is because it's like talking to the German. Yeah, it's like talk to a lot of them. It's like talking to a German who's like, what about Dresden? What about Dresden? It is boiling down what the vast majority of the crimes have been on one side, to point out a few instances that have happened on the Ukrainian side to try to make it seem like it's equal, when it isn't.
What?
If you even when we talk about the Donbass, the Russian-backed separatists bombed civilians, and the Ukrainian-backed forces and volunteer battalions, which were not as heavily regulated by the government, and that was a problem. But that was also because the government failed to defend the country. They also engaged in reckless behavior that bombed civilians. But to try to a lot of Ukrainians are going to react to that in a very negative manner because it's boiling down an entire conflict. Because both sides. It's both sides in an issue, which you can't really both sides.
It's not the argument.
The vast majority of the war crime are on one side. No, I'm not saying that's your argument. I'm saying that's why Ukrainians will react that way when they hear about the bombing of the Donbass children, because it seems like a very small, insignificant detail in the grand scheme of things when you look at the vast amount of atrocities. For example, in 2021, I think 7 people died from shelling in the Donbass. 2022, the number is not even comparable. We're talking like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,
You're just distorting the argument.
People.
I said 2014-15 originally, yeah. I know the statistics. I know that first a lot of children died during the heavy artillery shelling, and then citizens naturally moved out of the areas being shelled, and so by 2021, less people were dying, less civilians were dying to shelling. Like, why should they keep dying there for 8 years straight? And there was less shelling, you're right. And there were Minsk agreements by which, if ratified by the Ukrainian Rada, which they were supposed to, would give those people an ability to reach autonomy using a more peaceful means.
But the Russians
and
also
remain
did not
within...
abide by Minsk. They didn't abide by Minsk.
Russians did abide by Minsk. Good correction, right on time. He was about to say something wrong and fixed it right on time. Both sides didn't abide by Minsk. You're right. Both sides didn't do it.
That wasn't. I didn't say anything wrong.
Let me respond to what you said earlier, though. So listen, I know it's very nuanced. I come from a Jewish family, and I have people that disappeared. We don't know where they ended up, but disappeared in Austria and disappeared in Western and Eastern Germany, out of my family. So let me explain to you how, as a Jew, I would respond to your comparison to World War II and the bombing of Dresden. I think that the bombing of Dresden, as a Jew, that has no reason to like those Germans, specifically the Nazis that were bombed, was an atrocity. It was a horrible atrocity. So was the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those were atrocities committed by the Allies against German civilians as a campaign of terror to convince German civilians to fight against their government and to stop the war. It was a completely stupid policy. Just as stupid as and criminal and terroristic as the Russian attacks on Kiev. When Russia bombs civilians in Kiev, that is an equal type of terrorism, right? The firebombing of Dresden was a huge atrocity, and the people responsible for it after the war, they should be given an award for defeating the Nazis and then put to prison for the rest of their lives for killing women and children while doing so unnecessarily. It's possible to weigh two things at once and realize that both of them are evil and not support evil done in also the planes that went to bomb Dresden could have bombed one of the concentration camps so less Jews died, but there were various excuses why that didn't happen. So we can dig into World War II history. Don't bring it up, okay? If you don't know about it enough.
Wait. Okay. Wait. I'm sorry. No, first off, I'll just say Kashmir. Like feigning a type of respectability politics before saying you don't know anything about Dresden. When I didn't go into the details of Dresden. You don't know if I know anything about Dresden. Just kind of like you don't know anything about Dresden. My only point by bringing up Dresden is that everyone knows that the Germans commit the vast majority of the atrocities. And so for a Ukrainian, if they hear about the Donbass children getting bombed, when the Russians invaded, not to protect those people, they have been killing those people en masse through their bombing campaign. When we talk about 2021, it was a very small amount of people. So when they hear about, in comparison, relative to the amount of people that are dying now, and even at the time, a lot of the people that are being killed, and when you look at a lot of these statistics, it's on both sides of the divide. It isn't just like, oh, the Ukrainian militias went down, they just kill everybody. So when people talk about the bombing of Donbass by Ukrainians, why is it not said in the same breath, the bombing of the Russian speakers of the Donbass and the bombing of the Ukrainians by the separatists in the Donbass? People don't say that because they're trying to micro zoom in on specifically that to try to make it of both sides. That's why Ukrainians react so negatively to that. I have other points
also
I wanted
because,
to...
Sorry, very quick. No, Dylan is correct, but also because for literally 9 years at this point, this have been the major point of Russian propaganda, which we joke about here, like, bomb Donbass, we say dom Donbass, because this have been by Russians used as an excuse to say, those like far-right Ukrainian evil cunts, I'm sorry for the word, they bombed people in Donbass, their own people in Donbass, Russian speakers, by the way. Those battalions who fought against the Russians in Donbass were Russian speakers, most of them, from Kharkiv, from Donbass, from Dnipro. You don't know, but that's okay.
No, it's true. I'm saying it's true.
Okay, of course. So this is just, for us Ukrainians, it just sounds very silly because not only it was used to demonize, Ukrainian efforts, it also, I think, obfuscates is the word, or hides the fact that basically that war, and the civilians, 3,000 and something civilians in Donbass who died, were killed because of Russian invasion and of militia that Russia sponsored and equipped and used to cause unrest and to cause war in my country. They were not bombed because they were Russian speakers. They were not bombed because the Ukrainians just like killing their own people. They were bombed because Russia invaded. This is the result and direct fault exclusively of Russia, not Ukraine. So
that's
sorry,
a bad
I don't know what
position.
to tell you.
Just stop.
Yeah.
It's a bad position to excuse the killing of children because Russia invaded. The fact that Russia lies, the fact that Russia is evil and it aggressive.
But no one is saying, yay, dead kids. No one is saying that. Goodbye, I didn't kick him in if he wants to leave because I want to get a fucking word in on my fucking panel. He can leave like the coward he is. A fucking scumbag. No, but no one is saying, no one, not a single soul is saying that bombing children is good or okay.
Makes him a coward for popping out.
It absolutely makes him a coward. If you can't stand up for your beliefs and you have to filibuster the whole time, you are a fucking coward. And if he wants me to say that to his face, he can come fucking back on. I'll go on his show. I'll do what needs to be done. And I will take him down if I need
obviously he can't stand up for himself if he's muted.
I'm scared.
He can stand up
I'm
after,
standing for you right now. What a man.
Turn on my fucking show.
Maybe this panel needs some NED funding.
Sorry, can I just fuck? I hate. Sorry,
someone's muted and they're like, all right, fuck it, I'll dip out, and then you're like, coward. It's like, well, it's not like he can say anything.
That's it. Yeah, well.
What a chat, weak.
Okay.
There was a.
We gotta end this because I have
it's a silly position.
Gang, if you've liked this content, remember you can give me money or you can give any of these people money, or you can see us all, right? Thank you for coming. This was a great show. Really appreciate you. Are any of you still streaming right now on Twitch that I can write into?
I'm ending after this.
Oh, you're ending
This-
after
this-
this? Well, it doesn't
yeah.
matter. Then
The
let's go to
Kaiser
I'm
rifle
really
is the new
important.
match. Okay, I rise a good pick.
All right. Well, y'all have a good one.
Let's go to sleep.